Let's see if I do.
Just don't share it verbally.
Okay.
Just text her and see if she's planning on joining. Verbally.
Okay.
Just text her and see if she's planning on joining.
I don't have it.
No, I don't either.
Okay.
All I have is email.
Oh, she's here.
No, that's, oh, there she is.
Perfect timing. So
Excellent.
Diane, when you said you were going to start the meeting, does that mean that you went live to YouTube?
No, I don't either.
Okay.
Yes, that is.
Oh, she's here.
What's up with the feedback?
Somebody has YouTube on in their background. Somebody has the live agenda link. Diane, when you said you were going to start the meeting, does that mean that you went live to YouTube?
If you're not speaking, would you mind muting, please?
All right, it looks like we have our 5-member board. It is 2 minutes past 5:30. Diane just went to confirm that we're live on channel 28 and live on YouTube. I think we are, so heads up. Diane, are we live on YouTube and live on channel 28? Want me to go check?
I would like to get the audio squared away first.
Hillary, are you able to get more light on your face?
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, something's going on with my camera. So let me give it a try since we haven't started yet.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I think Hillary's in the witness protection program right now, so. You're getting a lot of light from your blinds. That's the problem, if you can.
Okay, I think we resolved the audio reverb. Can we confirm? I'm just going to wait 2 minutes. I think
Much
it worked.
better, Hillary. Thank you.
Okay, Chair Miller, you have your full member of the board. You also have members for the first 2 items on the agenda present, and you are welcome to call the meeting to order.
Great. Welcome, everybody. This calls to order the Tuesday, June 28th meeting of the Yountville Zoning and Design Review Board meeting. And can we get a roll call, please? Shall I do it, Kirsty?
I'm sorry, Diane's still having reverb on her audio. Hold on one second.
Okay.
In person was so much easier.
Hey, folks, thanks for being patient. We're testing just one more time.
Testing audio.
Okay, I think we've solved it.
Excellent.
I
So
hope so.
I will once again call to order the meeting on June 28th, 2022 of the Yountville Zoning and Design Review Board, and we'll move to a roll call.
Chair Miller,
Here?
Vice Chair Jordan,
Here.
Member Tripp,
Here?
Member Cook,
Here.
and Member Zagorski.
Here.
All are present, no absentees.
Excellent. Will you join me, please, in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and life for all. All right. Has everyone had a chance to look at the agenda? And would anyone like to move to adopt the agenda?
I will make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I will second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion by Cook, second by Zagorczyk, and the motion carries unanimously.
Correct. And
we have no minutes. We're still having a PDF issue, so we hope to have many months of minutes at your next meeting.
Excellent. We'll look forward to that. Public comment on matters not listed on the agenda.
There have been no public comments on the agenda items. There are 2 public comments, which I'll read into the record when the item opens.
Okay, great. Then let's move to the first of the presentations.
Chair Miller, I believe last time this property was reviewed, I had to recuse myself due to my proximity to the property. So I'm assuming it's the same this week.
Yes, those rules have not changed. We'll see you back here momentarily.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take the first item. Kyle Johnson, assistant planner, is out sick today, and so he was going to present, and I will go ahead and follow up. Most of the board members here today remember this item before you on May 6th. There were multiple items that this application received approval of, and there was one item that was denied. The item that was denied was the appearance of a veneer siding on the exterior of the facade. And the CDRB denied that choice of siding and asked the applicant to revert what was approved in the building permit, which was cedar shake. The item before you today is only limited to the architectural elements of the change of siding and the change of fenestration. And I am going to go ahead and share my screen.
Forgive me, Kirsty, are we not also reviewing some of the exterior detailing on the front of the building?
Correct.
Okay.
You're going to be reviewing today exterior modifications to include the siding choice and fenestration changes. Can you guys see my screen? Do you guys see a rendering?
Yes.
Okay. So what you see here is the same existing siding filled and painted. Actually, before I start, I should read into the record 2 public comments, and then I'll start my presentation. So forgive me, one of them is quite long. It was received at 4 o'clock today to the email at public comment. It is from Paul and Rita Engler. They were commenters at the last CDRB hearing. Dear board members, our comment to the above application reference 2041 Madison Street. We own the property to the immediate east of applicant's 2043 Madison Street and attended and commented at the last public hearing in May regarding this matter. Although applicant's current proposal is an improvement, we are disappointed that the applicant still fails to use a permitted siding material for this project. The project has already been red tagged twice, the first time for making structural changes without a permit and the second time for installing improvements not allowed by the permit. At its hearing on May 10th, 2022, the board rejected the fiber composite exterior siding that had already been completely installed on the building. The siding was not allowed under the building permit, which called for hardy shingle statement collection. Applicant apparently chose to ignore the permitted siding and used a material that was in clear violation of the Yountville Municipal Code, which states material that appear faux or veneer-like should be avoided. Joints or raw edges of material should be concealed to create an appearance of authenticity. If somebody could mute. In rejecting applicant's request to use the faux wood At the May 10th, 2022 meeting, the board commented it looked plastic. It looks like pergo flooring. That material is not approved by the manufacturer for siding, and it is far below acceptable standards. The applicant is now proposing to paint and fill in the edge gaps of the very same siding the board rejected at its last meeting. The proposed siding is still the same plastic pergo, far below accepted standards material that the board already rejected. The siding material is in clear violation of allowable siding under the municipal code. As a result, this board should preserve the integrity and architectural style of Yountville and again reject the proposed siding. Finally, as agreed to by the applicant at the May hearing, the condition of approval should state that the landscaping plan shall limit plantings along the east property line to a maximum height of 8 feet, and that applicant shall maintain the plantings so not to encroach onto the property located at 2043 Madison Street. Thank you, Paul and Rita Engler. Same commenter, second comment. This one is by a email. We also have a concern about filling in the gaps between the edges of the siding material. What happens if when the filler material falls out in 10 to 15 years or less? Then it will look awful. And if this is a spec home or the applicant does not intend to live there a long time, it'll likely go unrepaired. If this non-approved siding material is allowed, the condition of approval should specify that the gap material be properly maintained so that it or a proper substitute remains in place for as long as the siding material remains on the building. In the event the board accepts the non-compliant siding, we would prefer applicant's Exhibit B over C. Thank you again, Paul and Rita Engler. So what you see on my screen before you today is what is referenced in both the staff report and in the public comment letter as Exhibit B, rendering 1. The applicant is choosing to fill in the gaps of the siding and paint it. There is a western wall that they did paint to show an example to staff and the ZDRB. So I hope that the ZDRB did get an opportunity to go and look at it. The elevation that you see before you includes 3 different colors of shades to provide to relief the massing of the front facade. Included is architectural bands, architectural elements around the windows, framing the windows, extended corbels, and then the cedar shake on the top of the eave. As discussed in the staff report, this is staff's superior choice. Staff does believe that it meets the intention of the zoning ordinance as it relates to that it allows composite siding to look like horizontal wood lap. Staff has interpreted the painting and the filling to comply with the intention of the zoning code for it to appear wood-like. Staff did feel that the previous rendition was to pretend to look like wood, whereas this looks like painted wood. Staff also prefers the cedar shake on the eave. What this does is not only breaks up the massing of that front elevation, provides some relief, but it's also very much in harmony with multiple neighbors down the street. Staff counted 3 houses on this block that had similar treatment, so it feels like it's in alignment with the era of the home and the neighborhood. There's a second rendering. Hopefully it just comes on up. Okay, can everybody see my screen now? It has a similar facade with a trellis. Yeah?
Yeah.
So this is what was referenced in the staff report as Exhibit C or rendering 2. This is an alternative option. As you can note, both of these show the 2 sconces removed, very much making it look like a horizontal wood lap siding. Again, 2 different color tones to break up the front elevation, some plantings. Although this rendering is quite beautiful, staff does want to remind the ZDRB that the landscaping, this is a 0 lot line or 6-inch front setback. So there's very limited room for any landscaping, and there is a condition of approval that if there are planters placed, that the applicant would need to confirm that it's entirely on their property. So although the landscaping definitely helps to soften this front elevation, break up the massing, we don't know at this point how feasible it is. And the reason why staff recommended the first option is because it feels more long-term, and this is reliant on potentially seasonal or temporary landscaping. I have one more exhibit to show. This is the color material board. As I shared, I don't know if everybody can see this, but the western elevation is the original wood siding that was brought before the ZDRB, and excuse me, the northern elevation. The western elevation is what the applicant has shown and due faith effort to really portray what it would look like if it were painted.
Hey, Diane, do you?
I just muted her.
Thank you.
So here's an example of what it would look like. Staff does interpret this to be consistent with the zoning ordinance because it does allow wood composite siding. It just needs to look as if it were wood. The color boards are a neutral gray with accents and different shades of the same color family. White trim, very much in harmony with the local architecture of Yountville, and then the cedar shingle as proposed on the eave. That concludes my staff report along with the public comments. I open the ZDRB to comment on the presentation. Oh, I would like to also introduce the homeowner and the architect who is here today. They may want to say some things. Staff did want to point out that in your packet was revised proposed conditions of approval. And what that includes is a specific project-specific condition of approval. If you are to consider approving it tonight, staff would like clear direction in your motion. So Chair Miller, would you like me to pass it on to the owner and the applicant now, or do you would you like to open up questions for staff?
Sure. Are there any questions for staff? In light of that, I think we can go to a presentation by the owner and or architect.
David, would you like to start, please?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jorge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for taking time to meet with us again, and thank you to Kirsty and the town planning organization for the help you've given us as well. With the respect to the feedback from the last meeting, I think we've worked as closely as we can to ensure that we meet all of the concerns that were addressed at the last meeting, both in terms of the site itself, site maintenance, as well as addressing the feedback that you gave us. I have to say that I've owned the house for 11 years and I lived there full time for 5 until I got remarried. And we started this project with the intention of once my stepchildren graduate, of coming back to Yountville in the next year or so full time. I have to say that if we'd known what we thought was a deferred maintenance and remodel would escalate to this, we certainly would have approached it from a very different perspective. And we very much appreciate the support both of the town in terms of guiding us from a position where we probably shouldn't have started from to get to here, as well as the committee being supportive of giving us the feedback to make sure that we can be a compliant part of the community going forward. So I do hope that what we propose today meets your requirements and will allow us to drive this project to completion. It's certainly been longer, more expensive, more complex, and a lot more stressful than we ever imagined it would be. Recognize some of that as a feature, as a function of the fact that we probably didn't start from where we wish we would have done. But with that, again, appreciate the committee's time, appreciate the town's time. We look forward to being full-time members of the community, and I'll turn it over to Jorge to update you on the various changes that we've made.
Thank you, David. Christy, do you want to share your screen or should I share mine? You're muted, Christy. Here we go. Can you enlarge it, please?
Do you see it okay?
Yes, we're just not in the right place. We have to start at the beginning. If it, yeah, all the way back, all the way back, all the way, there we go. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Board members, thank you for seeing us again and for giving us this opportunity to present. The image in front of you, are you all able to see it? This is the original image that you saw in May.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so clearly there were criticisms of several things. Primary, of course, was the siding material and its appearance as members of Gorsuch termed it, a laminate flooring. But also the joints, the gaps, and from Chairman Miller, basically the treatment of the facade, that he felt, if I may paraphrase, that we were not particularly imaginative, admittedly the rear of the house, but still in the treatment and articulation, we didn't do a very good job of turning it into something that should be facing the street and being harmonious with its neighbors. So let's start with, thank you, Christy, the next slide, please. Let's start with this. This is the siding material that we presented to you. Now, if I may just step a moment back because of the comments from the neighbor, there is nothing substandard about this siding material. There is nothing deficient, I believe that was his word, about this siding material. This siding material will require far less maintenance and will require no repairs as opposed to a traditional siding. It is a composite siding. However, as Ms. Cook pointed out, there were several issues. One is that it looks like faux wood. Two, these vertical gaps between the boards that people found objectionable, understood. Christy, if we could go to the next slide. And of course, the joints, especially at the corners where there is a piece of trim, but it does not hide both sides. And that's really a fairly contemporary look that is not in keeping with the historical district of Yountville. So we had created this mock-up. Yes, thank you. The next slide. That I hope you all had a chance to see. It is not the final version, but it's very close. Again, to address the comments of Mr. Engler, there is no filler material between the boards. We simply slid the boards together, and that is where they will stay. There's nothing to fall out. There's nothing that's going to change in other than, you know, normal aging of the paint and exposure to the elements. What we did was push the boards together because if you remember, there is a track behind them so they can slide. And we took those gaps that were between the boards and we created those gaps behind the molding at the corners. So any movement or expansion can be taken up by that without being visible. We thought a two-tone paint arrangement would help to divide the facade, which especially in the front is rather tall and narrow. And it would also accent the belt line that you've already previously approved that runs now underneath the windows. We did make that change. It's not part of the windows. The windows have their own trim. And then the horizontal band runs underneath. Christy, could we go to the next one? So in our presentation, we actually had A and B, and the trellis version is A and the other one is B. Obviously, we'll use staff's designations for any comments and hopefully approval of one or the other down the road. Of course, the sconces are gone. Nothing we can do about the panel, but it will be encased in the approved enclosure. We've already purchased, have not yet installed the numbers that are illuminated, but they look precisely the same as what is shown in the rendering. We haven't located it because it's slightly different depending upon which of the two options you hopefully approve. I think this speaks for itself. We have a list of vines that would be, if not native, certainly Mediterranean vines that are actually appropriate for a shady, partial sun location, which this is. It's not going to get full sun except late in the afternoon this time of year. We're using the planters that you previously approved, the raised planters for the vines. And again, we happen to agree with staff, and as do the owners, that this is a good option, but what those vines look like all year round, maintenance, growth, and whatever, one is not guaranteed that it's going to look this pretty all the time, and we understand that. Christy, if we could go to the next one, please. So this is a little bit simpler. We did add some trim. We, I think, did a better job of defining the fenestration in the front. And I think the shingles at the top really, especially with the secondary band, really do a good job of bringing this scale down to be more cohesive with the houses in the neighborhood and with the style and the pattern of essentially a craftsman house, which we've turned this into. And the treatment of the windows that I mentioned before is on all three exposed sides. So it's not just the treatment of the front. We did a lot of versions. We discussed many of them with staff. We went through a Zoom meeting where we went through all of the different options. I have them available to you if you want to see them, but the consensus amongst the owners, architects, and staff was that these were the preferable two options for your consideration. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much.
Chair Miller, are you interested in seeing the other renditions?
Nope. I would count that to be part of the architect's process. And I think what they've shown us is plenty for us to chew on. If there's anybody that disagrees with me, we could certainly take a look at them. But I wonder if anybody else has any questions. I do have a few questions of my own.
I do not have any questions. I just wanted to say that I appreciate both of you taking into account our comments last time. I think you've done a very good job of listening and trying to make the house fit in. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree. My only question is, I know you explained to us how you've captured those vertical gaps in the corner underneath the trim boards. And I'm wondering, do the horizontal gaps require any kind of a treatment, or is it just a shadow line?
It's just the shadow line, sir. It's no different than any other siding.
Okay.
In
That's
that
great.
respect.
I think, you know,
it's a tongue and groove, excuse me. It's a tongue and groove arrangement where they fit into one another. So it's just the shadow line.
So it's like an exaggerated nickel gap.
Exactly.
Of sorts. Okay. Which I think of as a historic treatment that's appropriate for the agrarian climate that we're in. And so that seems appropriate to me. I think that the way that you've treated the front window fenestration and made those that window set kind of somewhat connected makes a lot of sense. And I personally like the version that has the upper pediment treated with the shake shingle. I think that looks really good, and I think it does exactly what you said. It tends to bring the proportions more into a street proportion. The other thing is I like the darker color on the bottom. So in some of the renderings, it shows the darker in the middle and some with the darker on the bottom. I think that serves to weight the building a little bit and give it a little bit more sense of place. And as in this rendering right here. And I think that the elimination of the sconces is a huge improvement. So the last comment that I would make is that I agree with you that this material is suitable. Concrete composite is used on many buildings in Yountville. It often takes the place of wood because it's much longer lasting. So I think it goes a long way to ameliorate the issues of maintenance, I think. So, and with that, I will turn it over to any of the other members of the board. Anybody else have any comments?
Happy to share some comments. I echo the comments from my fellow board members. You know, this project clearly has a long and challenging history, as Mr. Savage alluded to, and obviously we've heard in the past. And our last session where we had to review and make some rejections is not something that we enjoy, and it was difficult because we know how much has gone into this, and we know that there's always more than we even know. But in the end, our goal is always to see if we can put our collective heads together with the community in mind and get to a positive result that in the end feels collaborative and a win-win. And so even though we left on a not so positive note, it's just really refreshing to see how far this has come to a point where we can look at this and all just get really excited. Knowing that there's still work and cost, but ultimately, when you took it very seriously, and I would say, I think a lot of the perspective and even some of the write-in comments, I think, are more reflective of the past than the present. Because if we were to see this for the first time at face value, we would be saying everything that we're saying now. And I think it's the job of this board is to look, again, at the present and the future, and seeing where you ended up with the paint and the touches and the adjustments are, I think, in the spirit of everything we're trying to do here. So it's from my standpoint, very happy to endorse this.
Excellent. So with that, I think
maybe Member Tripp may have unmuted herself. Did you?
Oh, yes. I just wanted to say I agree with Chair Miller's statement on which option he prefers for the same reasons. And also, I do think this fits much better than what we looked at previously. So although I know this has been a painful process for the applicant, I think the result is much, much better aesthetically. So that's my.
Thank you. So with that, would anyone like to make a motion, or I'd be happy to do that myself? I'm going to go ahead and move that we approve this rendering, which I'm sorry, it's the one with the shake shingle at the top and without the trellis. I can't remember if it's A, B, or C.
Reference it as Exhibit B.
Exhibit B, thank you, Christy. And that we also take into account the issues that were listed in the previous approval and the Eastern Neighbors comments about the plantings along the driveway.
Excuse me, sir, they've been taken care of and they will be maintained at that height. They're lower than 8 feet.
Okay.
We took care of that immediately.
Great. Thank you for doing that.
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I just have to do a roll call vote because we're by Zoom. So I have a motion by Chair Miller to approve Exhibit B with the inclusion of the landscape maintenance. Second by Commissioner Cook. And my Member Zagorczyk.
Aye.
Aye. Member Tripp.
Aye.
And note that Vice Chair Jordan is excused.
Excellent.
Thank you, Jorge.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, much appreciated.
I know you're happy you'll be able to wrap this up now.
Yes, we will.
Been a long time coming, so I very much appreciate the feedback and support of the committee.
Thank you, David, for taking our comments to heart. Appreciate it.
We're excited to finish the project and get off your agenda, so thank you very much. Definitely off Kirsty's as well, so thank you.
Excellent. Okay, we will go on to our second presentation, which is the design review of the property at 6887 Yount Street, APN 036-028-002.
Stephen, Chair Miller, I will have to recuse myself because I own a property within 500 feet of this. So see you later.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, as will I just edge into that as well within the perimeter. So unfortunately, I will have to recuse myself, but otherwise look forward to seeing the result.
Thank you.
All right. Are you guys able to hear me okay?
Yes.
That's fine.
Okay, great. Okay, so good evening, Chair Miller and members of the board. The project before you today is at 687 Yount Street, and it's on the southwest corner of Yount and Madison. This project has been around for a little while. It was here prior to me joining the planning team, and we've gone through quite a few renditions of the project in order to reach what we're bringing to you today. We also did receive 2 public comments, I believe. So Kirsty, do you want to read those?
I'm sorry, Diane, those were for the first item and I already wrote them into the record. We've received no public comments on this agenda item as of now.
Okay, great. So the existing parcel is 7,500 square feet, obviously a lot larger than we typically see in the town. It consists of a 2-bedroom, main, and 2 other small structures. And the baths weren't listed on the assessor's record, but I was told by a previous homeowner that there were 2 bathrooms there. So let's just go ahead and look at these photos here. So this is on the west elevation, I'm sorry, the east elevation, the view from Yount Street looking west. And this is on the north elevation looking south. So you can kind of see the side of the home here. And then also here, you're able to see part of the shed. I wasn't able to capture the barn because there was too much vegetation in the way. So as for what is proposed, we have the primary dwelling facing Yount Street, and that's 1,874 square feet, and that does include a 1,288 square foot basement that's habitable. There's also a 2-bedroom, 2-bath ADU that's detached from the home on the back half of the lot, which does have the attached 2-car garage. Both the primary and the ADU have covered porches. The main has both a porch in the front as well as the back, and the ADU has a porch as well. Other elements that have been incorporated into this project include a 200 square foot pool and a 200 square foot pergola. Okay, let's see here. So the project would require raising all the structures in order to construct what's before you today. And this is the home from the east elevation, which is the front of the home. And the materials are as they were provided to you in the staff report, which with the lap siding, the composition roof, and the operable wood shutters. The color palette shown here on the right, and it's a pretty accurate representation of the color palette. It's just a little bit off because of obviously sharing it via Zoom instead of in person. And then you can also see the wood shake as a decorative feature under the eaves, and that's carried throughout both sides of the home. So this is a view from the north elevation, which you would see from Madison Street if you were looking south. You can see the same elements have been carried over, and they actually apply to all of the structures that are being built as far as materials and color and roof materials go. From this elevation, you can also see this balcony that's proposed. Actually, I would like to mention, coming back here, there is a balcony here. Some of you may have realized that, and some of you may have not, because it's not accurately represented in all of the images, the sectioning of the homes that will typically depict different angles of things. It's not shown in that, so it's easily missed, but this right here is a balcony on the front of the home. So coming back to the north elevation, you can see a second balcony here, and this would be looking west, and this is the balcony that I referred to in the staff report that I thought that the members might want to have a further discussion on for privacy concerns. There was originally a balcony proposed on the south side of the home, which would have had a direct line of sight into the adjacent property. So the applicant and the architect did revise and then moved the balcony to the back, and then we also have the one in the front. Another element you would see from the north elevation is this outdoor fireplace, and that is within the back porch that is also proposed. So, okay, so this is from the west elevation, and you can see the balcony once again that I just showed you on the previous slide. We also have these longer glass doors here. These are either the ones that slide in, the pocket doors, or accordion doors, and then these two open as typical doors would. You can notice here on the south elevation, these windows have been brought up a bit higher in order to create privacy for the adjacent property. And again, I wanted to point out that there would be a balcony here for the north elevation, although I don't know if it's difficult to see from this angle or if it's recessed enough where it wouldn't affect this elevation. Okay, moving on to the proposed ADU in the garage. The ADU entrance is on the east elevation, which is sort of the interior courtyard. So that's here, you can see the front door. And it's been created to sort of mirror the back of the main residence. The west and south elevations are straightforward and wouldn't be seen from the public vantage point. And then the landscaping and fencing, just as the rest of the requirements are, they are met. They have been maxed out pretty much in every capacity, but they are meeting all of those requirements. And so there would be a 3-foot picket fence running along Yount Street, as well as the entirety of Monroe Street. And then they had this arbor proposed here. There were conflicting plans. One set showed 2 arbors, one here at the front elevation and then one here at the north elevation. But it looks like with the bioretention and other landscaping that there is in fact not an arbor proposed here. And so we had included it in the conditions that fence, that 3-foot picket fence shall run along the entirety of this property boundary here. So additionally, they've provided the required screening for the adjacent property for parking purposes. And another item that would be visible most likely from the public right away would be the pergola that is here covering this outdoor fire pit area, which does have the ability to be 8 feet to the top, and then I think it's 10 feet overall is what would be considered the limitation for an unenclosed auxiliary structure. So I know this was pretty brief for everything that's going on with this project. I do have some points that I wanted to cover and discuss further, and I'm sure that you will have questions as well. And we do have Ivan, the architect, here, and also Terry McCrae, the owner. And we also have Rosalba Ramirez, who is here representing Public Works in case there's any questions about the bioretention area or something else related to the civil plan. So the things that came to my mind, well, one, the board is going to have to approve the additional auxiliary structures. So you're typically, the code has a max of 2 auxiliary structures, and that can be a combination of enclosed and unenclosed, or just one or the other. They both go into the same count of the auxiliary structures. This project has 3 unenclosed auxiliary structures proposed, which include the pergola, the outdoor fireplace, and the pool. Then they also have the enclosed auxiliary structures, which include the garage and the pool equipment room. And that also brings me, which I believe I clarified through the condition of approval and mentioned in the staff report, that the square footage on the pool equipment room would need to remain under 100 square feet in order for them to stay compliant with their FAR. And so we would require that as a condition. So the next item I would like to discuss is the balcony, which I've talked about throughout this presentation, considering the privacy and the line of sight to the adjacent property. The other items are, one, confirming the porch dimensions. The plans that were submitted didn't provide enough information to accurately measure the porches, because they weren't scaled where I needed them to be in order to make the measurements. So I did do some approximate square footages, and then they were listed out as the front porch being 290 and the back porch being 117. I did, and then it says the total covered porch square footage is 436. So I want to clarify that, and as well as some other details regarding the balcony with the applicant and the architect. And lastly, I want to have a discussion about the tree preservation requirements from this here. Oh, it's actually on the civil plans, which, let's see if I can pull those up real quick. Here we go. So on the civil plans, oh shoot, it opened in Bluebeam and I haven't used this program yet. I can show you on the other image, which is fine. So this right here is an oak, and as I mentioned in the staff report, the redwoods and the oak are going to be protected, which is wonderful. However, we do have a concern about the proximity of the oak tree to the ADU and whether it would be able to be protected properly and maintain its health and longevity of its health if the ADU were to be built this close to the tree. So let's see. Okay. Does anyone have any other questions in addition to this that they would like to start with, or one of these items that they also have concerns about and would like to offer their expertise?
Anyone? Yes.
I had a basic question that I just wanted to understand. So this has a, I think, 1,200 square foot basement, something like that. How, just in general, I wanted to understand, I do understand it's underground, but it would eventually be habitable. How does that fit with our existing FAR regulation? If you build an underground, does it not count towards your FAR? Because I do understand that FAR only applies to the home and not the ADU, but in total now the home would be 3,000 square feet. So I just wanted to get an understanding of how that works.
Sure. So yeah, basements are exempt as of right now. The way that the FAR is typically, the intent of it has to do with the massing, right? So because the basement wouldn't contribute to massing that would be seen from the public, it's not counted towards FAR.
May I may I tack on to that same question because I think it's pertinent and it's a good segue.
Sure.
Does the 436 square feet of porch, much of it covered, I think the back porch is entirely covered. Also, how does that affect the FAR? Because I believe it affects the massing quite a bit.
Yeah, so I understand that point, and that could be more of a discussion here today. But as far as me analyzing the project, the covered porches wouldn't contribute because they're not enclosed, because FAR is floor. I don't know, Christy, you might have a better definition, but basically covered porches are not included in FAR. But if we are looking at massing, especially when we have so many auxiliary structures included in this project, I could definitely see that being a point that we want to discuss.
Yes. Okay.
Right. Because almost the entire lot is going to be covered with the structures of one sort or another, especially if you include the swimming pool or the pool.
That is true.
So just on the FAR, is that something that appears in our ordinance? So basically for FAR, if you're willing to dig down, you could build as big a building as you wanted or have as much square footage as you wanted?
Yep, the code that was adopted at the end of last year went to a lot of detail about this, and okay. The definition of enclosed floor area is above ground. Okay. So anything subsurface, the basement, as you can tell, there are access ways for the bedrooms and then light wells, which is required by California Building Code. They are delineated on the plan, but the basement finished floor is at the floor level. So the entirety of the basement is exempt from floor area ratio under our current code. The auxiliary structures are exempt from the floor area ratio because the garage is in the rear. The ADU is entirely exempt from floor area ratio. The one element that the ZDRB does have discretion on is the number of auxiliary structures. So the definition of an auxiliary structure, as Diane mentioned, is the pool, the fireplace, the covered porches are actually considered an architectural element, and it is explicitly exempt from the code. The code is also very explicit about encouraging front porches, so I wouldn't want to touch that, and the applicant did expand it from the original design, so we're happy with the depth of the porch and it being as close to the front setback as possible. We do have concerns with the second floor balcony because of the privacy. The house to the neighbor to the south is set back. Because it was really hard to see what the porch looked like based on the elevations, that the depth and the width and the, we couldn't really determine what the effect would be on the neighbor. So I think under the ZDRB's purview tonight is the consolidated lot coverage, the cumulative effect of multiple auxiliary structures, and the maximum floor area ratio. Rosalba, like Diane mentioned, is here with Public Works. They were subject to stormwater detention. So there is a stormwater detention located on the north elevation and adjacent to Monroe Street. So the lot area is covered in there. The pergola, because it is quasi covered, is considered a auxiliary structure.
So I just have one question, Kirsty. Everything you said makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, it doesn't matter if it makes sense to me, but it was very clear to me. But I just want to ask, in terms of understanding, why is it that we're not really approving a residence that includes the basement? I guess that's all I'm trying to understand.
Oh, you are. It's clear. And there is some, what you're approving today is a concept level approval.
Okay.
The concept level of approval includes the basement. It is a habitable basement. It will be finished floor. It will be even a bedroom. So the total floor area of the house is, a 2-story with a basement. With
Okay.
the access wells, they're about 3 foot deep with the stairs for the access for the bedrooms and light wells. You do have discretion on it. It is exempt from the floor area ratio, as Diane mentioned, included in your packet were 3 spreadsheets. Those are what we call the objective standards and the design standards for any residential development and residential development in Old Town Historic, and then also the ADU. This application meets all those objective standards, design standards, and that is why it's before you today. It does, at every opportunity, max out the total allowable height, square footage. It does exceed the number of auxiliary structures, which is something that the ZDRB, if the house when the ADU were already built and they wanted to have all these auxiliary structures, it would still be before you for your purview. So the concept of massing and lot coverage is under your purview. As Diane has done a great job of revise the conditions of approval. And I do think as part of her ultimate recommendation, we would like to bolster the tree preservation condition and looking at it into further detail and comparing the civil notes on the tree preservation for the heritage oak tree on the southern property boundary. It does appear that the ADU is quite close. So we would like to bolster that condition of approval to have a arborist opinion that it can be built in the location that it's proposed. If not, modifications to that ADU size or location can be approved under staff's jurisdiction because it's at the ADU. And then in addition, were there other specific conditions of approval that you wanted to include, Diane?
Yeah, there were a few that were specific to this project. So one was moving the refuse storage to an appropriate location because it cannot be in the setback. Not all of the plans showed it in the setback, but there was 1 or 2 pages that showed it. They're inconsistent, so I just wanted to make that a clear understanding. Also, as I mentioned, the fencing being 3 feet that had occurred, that was discussed on a phone conversation, and I wanted to clarify that the 3 feet fencing will run along both the entirety of Monroe and Yount Street, and that there is only 1 arbor, which is proposed for the front of the home, and that the break would only occur along Monroe Street to accommodate the driveway apron. Let's see. And then also it was unclear as to whether the basement, let's see what's on here, the egress right here, whether that encroached. It cannot encroach beyond 3 feet into the 5-foot setback, so that would need to be specified on the plan submitted for the building permit.
Well,
Additionally, the building permit, the plan submitted with the building permit would need to show conformance with the 6-foot spacing between the buildings. The WELO application needs to be submitted for landscaping, which is the water efficient landscaping ordinance as required by the state. We would also need the neighbor's consent for the 6-foot fence with the 8-foot lattice, especially since we have some windows on the south elevation. The pool equipment room, as I mentioned, would need to be under 100 square feet and have that shown in the plans that are submitted. And then bolstering of I could read what I have written out for the tree preservation plan. It was included in the staff report materials that I submitted, but basically the entirety of section 17.128.080 of the municipal code, which is tree protection during development, all of those will need to be met And we are definitely taking that seriously, considering the species that is located near the ADU. So, and as Kirsty mentioned, if that is not able to be met, if any of those are not able to be met, then we would need a revised ADU that would allow the health of the tree to remain. Let's see. That was all of the specifics. Sorry if I was.
Diana, is it possible if the location of that oak tree is endangered by the proximity of the ADU, can the ADU be shifted toward Monroe Street?
That's what we were just discussing. So it does seem to be a bit close, and if it is too close, then revisions will need to be made. The ADU can't be moved forward anymore because it's at the accurate setbacks as it is right now. So you wouldn't necessarily be able to just shift the home.
Okay.
I mean, we could look at that further. They could submit that and we could analyze it, but I think that all of the setbacks have been met precisely at their maximum.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask a few questions. This project raises all kinds of red flags for me, because it feels like not only are they pushing the FAR, but they're also pushing a lot of the other design restrictions and asking for additional structures to be approved, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think there's a chance at all that tree would survive the construction that is going to be coming up within 18 inches of it. So I don't think that their landscape plan is anything but destined to failure, really, in terms of that protected tree. And it troubles me that it's not considered in what they're presenting, because it just seems so obvious to me. And I'm an amateur gardener, but I know enough to raise a red flag on that one.
So I'll just speak to that really quickly. So I understand where you're coming from, and this suffices for the general landscape approval, but it's going to be supplemental to a larger landscape plan that would need to be proposed with the.
I'm not even talking about the landscape proposal. I'm talking about the building proposal, because it's the building that's going to kill the tree, not the landscape.
Right, but I'm just saying that's when the tree protection measures would be evaluated, because those all need to happen before the approval of the building permit, just for background.
Right, but if the building doesn't work with its environment, then what are we approving? Or what are we being
Chair
asked
Miller?
to do? Yeah.
Chair Miller, I just wanted to interrupt just for a minute. I just wanted to share, I did just confirm the setbacks. The ADU could be moved. And because this is an ADU, it's protected by state law for it to be approved ministerially by the planning department. So what Diane has offered is a condition of approval that says this oak tree needs to comply with the preservation measures. When the plans come in for building permit, and between now and then, staff can easily work with the applicant and their arborist to confirm that tree would be protected and that ADU could shift a little bit. I don't see this as a issue that can't be addressed as a condition of approval.
Okay. When I redeveloped my house in the Yountville Old Town District, I guess I mistakenly believed that the reason I got a historic preservationist involved was to determine that what I was replacing an old building with was something that fit with the character and scale of Old Town Yountville. What it appears this applicant has done is determined that the building that exists on their property has no historic significance, and so they can remove the building completely and replace it with something that, once again, doesn't have much historic significance and is what I would consider to be somewhat out of scale with the neighborhood. in that it is maxing out the FAR, including the concern I brought up earlier of having covered balconies on the second floor, which I think only serve to exaggerate the massing of the building in its environment. There's also concerns for me that are raised by casement windows and sliding glass doors, and I guess I'm assuming that the shutters are operable, but all three of those are things that are called out in the design ordinances as things that we try to dissuade from applicants presenting.
Operable shutters? You're saying operable shutters are listed as?
It does state clearly in the design ordinances that shutters that are inoperable or are purely decorative are not approved, that we can not approve them.
Right. We had a specific discussion with the architect early on about that, and he agreed to make the shutters, all of the shutters, operable.
Okay.
Because of that, I do recognize, and I think I mentioned it, or I did list it in the checklist and as an item of discussion within the staff report, that we generally discourage, the large doors, like you were saying, with the windows.
Well, and the sliding casement windows on the second floor, some of them shuttered, some of them not shuttered. The ones that aren't shuttered are not shuttered because there's not enough room for shutters to cover the windows. So it kind of points to the other windows being shuttered only because they were trying to add some appearance of historic relevance to the building because it's in a historic neighborhood. But they're operable, and that there are many windows that don't have any shutters whatsoever is kind of a curious idea in my mind, because why would you shutter some and not others?
Chair Miller, before you move on, I just wanted to note for the record, it was included in the staff report. There was a historical resource evaluation done on the existing house. It was determined that it was not eligible for preservation because it didn't meet the Secretary of State Interior standards. So that was one of the elements that we did request from the applicant at the beginning. They did submit it. So at this point,
and I saw that, Kirsty. I definitely saw that. What I would point you to is that in the zoning for Old Town Yountville, it clearly states, and I want to read it directly to you, that to promote the preservation of the historic character of Old Town, maintenance and rehabilitation of older structures is encouraged. Design review approval shall be required for all construction to ensure that new and renovated structures reinforce the character and scale of Old Town. I would argue that from my assessment, this building does neither the reinforcement of the character of Old Town or of the scale of Old Town. So I'm concerned, right out of the chute, that we're looking at something that does neither of those things.
I also wanted to let you know that both the applicant and the architect is here. So maybe if you wish, you could ask them. I don't know if they have prepared a presentation or if they would like to address the board.
Okay.
Ivan and Terry, are you interested in?
Yeah, this is, excuse me, this is Terry McRae. I'll jump in just for a second. Excuse me. First of all, thank you to the board for the meeting and the effort that the staff has put into this. This is a property that we've owned since 2019. It's obviously a property in Yountville that's been in need of renovation and tender loving care for a really long time. And since we live across the street from it, we thought it might better be us than somebody else. We chose, and by the way, we've lived in Yountville since 2011. We're not here all the time, but we travel a great deal for the business efforts that we have worldwide. We selected Ivan Lukrich, a Santa Rosa architect who had done much work in Yountville over the years, including the house that we're in at 2020, which is the Tuscan sort of home across the street from 6887 on Monroe. Ivan's successfully brought a number of projects to fruition in Yountville, and we liked his simplistic approach and his experience in working with the Yountville permitting process. Our goal was to follow the path of least resistance with the greatest neighbor support. We're not seeking any waivers here. We wanted to build a project that made sense, but it's also needs to be financially viable. So to one of the comments that I think has been made, I don't think it's represented necessarily well. Because this lot is 50 by 150, it sits on a corner, you automatically have something around 40% of the lot that can't be built on. So the idea that it's so massively covered with everything everywhere is not in fact the case. There is because of the setbacks on the two streets and the other two parts of the property, there's a pretty good unbuilt part of this, no matter how you use the requirements. We spent a great deal of time in the early discussion before we acquired the lot with the town. We spent a great deal of discussion with the town staff after we acquired it, with new staff after staff changed. There has been a number of submittals and discussions, and all of them, all along the way, have been consistent with us trying to build a project that made sense within the boundaries and things that you allow. So as an example, the old barn is not located in a good place and not lend itself to renovation. We said we'd probably be happy to take the wood from the old barn and use it in some of the fencing. We're definitely into adaptive reuse and things like that. But most of what has been done is straight out of the playbook of what you allow and what you will approve. So if the things that we've put forward are not in that category, then it's a bit of a surprise to us at this point in time. The neighbors have been in the loop on this to a certain extent. They didn't object about the balconies. We took balconies away that we thought would provide a lack of privacy to them. The balconies tend to be facing us or facing a Yount Street. Or the backyard between the two structures. The location of the oak in the back is a question, but we were working with what the city requirements were on ADU, and as you well know, and as Kirsty and Diane know, bit of a moving target the last 3, 6, 9 months with ADU regs and what the city's rules are, what the state's rules are, and it's not like there's a great formula for that right now. So we have no objection whatsoever with moving the ADU around in such a way to protect the trees. We did agree to keep the redwood trees from the onset. And the oak tree is certainly manageable and salvageable in every respect that we believe from the discussion we've had with our team. The folks that we selected to do the civil engineering and the landscape engineering are all professionals. They're all people that have done a great deal of work in town here. So, there's no place where we haven't approached this project professionally and with the intent to do it with the appropriate mass and scale. Are there some things we'd love to do differently if the rules were different? Yes. The whole complexity of a pergola, because it's a certain size and a certain height, is now requiring approval. The pergola is not the essential element to build the project, But the fact that it's a long, skinny rectangular lot automatically leaves a great deal of unbuildable surface on it. And we checked in great detail with the city about the FAR requirements with respect to porches, with respect to basements, to make sure that we were not presenting or pushing anything forward that was not completely consistent with the city standards. So with that, let me introduce Ivan Lukrich, and Ivan, you can jump in and talk about what you have in terms of introductory comments here, and then maybe with that, we'll take any specific questions that people have.
Yeah, I do think that, Ivan, it would be good to hear from you, and we can take specific questions. I also think that we should try to then nail down or put our heads together, the board with the applicant, and see if anything wants to be proposed or discussed for changes to please both sides, and then review the rest of the details that we had listed so we can come to an agreement opposed to going circularly.
Perfect.
All right, well, as Terry mentioned, the lot is very skinny, limited potential for building locations. Our preference was to put the ADU in the front, the main house in the back, to scale it up a bit, but that's not allowed within the town's permit process. We also tried to put the ADU on top of the garage just to minimize and open up more space on the lot. But again, that's not allowed in there. So the garage and the ADU have to be a one-story structure. If allowed, our preference would be to put the part of the ADU on the garage and again, leave more space between the two buildings. As far as the architectural features, it's the building, the main house, meets all of the setback requirements. It is stepped up, and it provides some setback from both streets, both from Yonge and Monroe Street. As far as the shutters, I think we discussed it with planning that they would be operable shutters. They're appropriately scaled so that they would be functioning shutters. As far as the materials, basic horizontal siding, composition shingle roof. We're also considering some solar on the roof, and that still needs to be decided on the amount required. Windows are clad with windows that are appropriate for the building. Columns, porches. The question on the rear sliding glass doors or folding doors, they are underneath both of the porches. Probably very little visibility from the street. Part of it is screened by the redwood trees, by the fencing. So I doubt that very much of it is going to be visible. If that's a requirement, we can certainly change that and have them French doors in those locations. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
And Chair Miller, if you have maybe some suggestions that you think would alleviate some of your concerns, or providing a rendering or just architectural element suggestions.
Before Chair Miller goes, could I just ask a question? So I'm looking at the proposed main drawing on those, for example, the west elevation. So on the west elevation, the roof extending on the left-hand side at the top, is that for purposes of a balcony, basically? Or I'm trying to understand if the balconies are covered and how that has an impact on the scale of the building. I guess that's my question.
So the balcony, the one on the left that you're seeing where it comes out, that is not the balcony itself, but it is recessed somewhat into back behind that. Again, that's why I had brought it up as a point of concern, because we don't have a lot of detail on it and enough to really get the full picture of what the front balcony looks like from every angle as well. And the back balcony, yes, it comes out specifically to cover the balcony.
Ivan, can you speak to Hillary's question, please?
Can you point to the rear balcony on the west elevation?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Could you point to the, Diane, could you point to the balcony, the rear balcony?
I don't.
Diana, yeah, you're close. I think
exactly right there, right there.
Right there, and then on the south elevation, right there. So I don't know if you could see that, but yes.
That is the balcony.
So here is the rear, here is the front.
Right.
So part of that balcony is covered. So about 6 feet of it is covered, and another 4 feet is uncovered balcony.
Okay.
Sorry, Ivan, can you repeat that? You're very muffled.
I'm sorry. The balcony, 6 feet of it is covered, and 4 feet is uncovered.
So, and you're talking about
there is no balcony on the south elevation, and the roof line
right
is not just to do with balconies, but to change the appearance of the roof, so it's not just a single contiguous roof. Is that correct, Ivan?
Correct.
Yeah, it's encouraged to have, obviously, as you probably know, it's encouraged to have different heights and roof pitches. So I do understand how they contributed in that manner.
Yeah, and I'd like to offer, I think the zoning ordinance has a design criteria that actually encourages front porches and front-facing two-story balconies. So staff does evaluate the front elevation on Yount Street, which in this case would be on the right of the south elevation, to be consistent with the zoning and design ordinance. It's a smaller second floor balcony. It steps above the front porch. There are no neighbors. It is directly fronting Yount Street. On the rear porch, which would be the west elevation, that you can see that now we didn't realize it was 6 foot covered and 4 foot deep. So 10 foot deep second floor balcony that could impose privacy concerns to the neighbor that would be to the south. Does propose concerns both because of the roof line massing that Chair Miller described and the privacy concerns. It was difficult for us to really see on the plans. So understanding a 10-foot depth second floor balcony is large enough for a table and chairs. And so I don't know if Ivan could better understand what the intention is, but there is a direct line of sight because the southern property owner's house is set back. So the house and this balcony, I don't know if you want to show the civil engineered site plan that shows the adjacent property, but.
We're happy to reduce the porch. If 6 feet is what's required, we can certainly just keep the covered portion and eliminate the uncovered portion.
So this
Kirsty, did you catch that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
He said he would be happy to cut it down to 6 feet. So Diane, if you start with that very first civil plan, yep, you can see the southern on this first site plan that Diane has up. There's a little bit of a topographical map that shows the house to the south, and then you can see where the second floor balcony is. It does like kind of look right at it. We weren't able to see what kind of windows were there or what kind of living space that that house had.
They've not raised any objection to it, and we've reviewed the plans with them. So
that's great. We really appreciate you reaching out to the neighbors. As of today's date, there's been zero public comment, whether it be positive or negative. So I kind of had a suspicion that somebody was reaching out to the neighbors.
Are there other questions of the architect or the owner at this point?
For the architect, I'm curious, what's the pitch of the roof?
6 and 12. In most areas, 8 and 12 in, it's been a while since it was submitted, so let me take a look, make sure I don't.
I may have them up on my other screen, but they vary, 6 and 12 and 8 and 12.
6 and, correct. The lower roof is 6 and 12, the upper roof is 8 and 12.
Yeah, I think the 8 and 12 feels a little more consistent with Old Town. Typically steeper pitches than, you get down to 6 and 12 or below and it looks like a contemporary home.
Ivan, when you said the windows are clad with windows, can you explain to me what you meant about that? I'm curious to know what the second floor windows are.
Wood windows with a cladding. Like
clad wood windows.
Marvin, Pella, Anderson.
So they're fiberglass clad wood windows?
Aluminum clad.
Aluminum clad.
Or any of them multi-pane?
Yes.
The first floor windows are multi-pane, Mike, and the second floor windows all appear to be sliding casements.
Our preference would be for casements so that there's not they're small enough that a double hung window would not fit due to the lower roof line.
Well, are there any other specific questions?
I had some questions about the staff report. On item, well, let me just start at the very beginning. In the discussion and background section, it indicates that the home's architectural style includes those typical of traditional and contemporary craftsman style home. I wouldn't agree with craftsman style, but I'm wondering what those are, those typical, those what, details, those elements?
I just felt that they kind of had elements of both. I'm trying to find where you're at exactly.
It's the second paragraph in discussion and background.
Oh, okay. I guess because of the gable roofing, the pillars, and even the front door with the side lights, and then obviously the covered porches. Those were sort of the elements that I was thinking of.
Okay. On this elevation, when I look at it, there are two things that I am concerned about. One is the sliding glass doors on the second floor, which are very explicitly called out in the design ordinance as being not favorable in Yountville as a whole, but especially in Old Town. They appear, because the roof is acting as the barrier for the balcony, they appear to be a very large casement window, which to me tends to look like what you see in apartment buildings. That's one element that that concerns me. The other is looking at this front elevation, and when you look at the plan view and the landscape plan, underneath these windows, especially the window to the right of the front door, is a light well. So there's no opportunity for planting in the, underneath that window. So you don't have a landscape plan that's integrated with the fenestration of the building when you're looking at this east elevation. I'm wondering if the architect and or the owner could speak to either of those issues.
That was brought up by Kirsty. The access, excuse me, I'm not sure why it's not working properly, but the access to the basement was moved to the side of the building.
I'm not talking about the access. I'm talking about the light wells that bring light and air down to that livable basement level.
They were moved to the side of the building. They were removed. I'm not sure. It shows that on the landscape plan, the architectural plans show it on the side of the building.
There's 20 feet of setback on both of those sides as well. Not on the side to the left of that illustration, but along Yount and Monroe, there's a ton of setback where there is planting and or the irrigation storm drain system. So there'll certainly be plenty of landscaping in that area.
And would there be a recommendation for the front, how you said that they seem like apartment building features or windows or sliding doors?
We can certainly make them French doors that are swinging doors.
Yeah, I would say, you know, some kind of divided light door, perhaps a course of wood underneath the cornice that makes it so that it doesn't, you're not going door to roof line, which is just a kind of a cheaper detail. It looks, you know,
we can submit a staff approval on that. We're not hung up about the flat windows. It was just in the space that was available. I mean, your comments are not inappropriate there. We don't have a problem making those windows attractive.
So I see that the front door is not centered between the columns. I'm looking at the plan now. And then the window that's pretty high on to the right of that front door is out onto the front porch, under the covered porch. It's hard for me to tell from looking at that elevation, that east elevation, what the detailing around that front porch looks like. But I guess
there's 3 columns on the front porch.
Yeah.
The area directly in front of the door projects out slightly so that it emphasizes the entry. And then the porch recesses slightly back toward where the stair is, where the window is underneath the porch. And the window serves as light into the stairwell.
And there's no like you're at the front porch, you're like slab on grade. There's no rise from the street level. You're just walking straight in.
Correct.
Okay. And there's no railing on that front porch. It's just an open, a narrower opening between the first 2 columns and a wider opening between the second 2 columns, and neither of the windows or doors are centered within those columns.
Correct. I don't see the reason why it has to be completely centered. You're looking directly at the front elevation. Rarely is that going to happen. There is a 3-dimensional.
I think, I mean, Old Town Yountville is marked by a lot of Greek Revival architecture, an agrarian kind of architecture that is very much a part of the agrarian environment here, and it's often marketed by those kinds of concerns. So anyway.
Oh, thank you for comments. If those are comments that we should incorporate, we'll certainly consider them.
Well, it's certainly a hallmark of the building that's there now, or the original, what I would imagine that original building was. You know, definitely a Greek revival.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if you could actually put a style on what's there now.
Yeah, I know.
It's as eclectic as you could find.
It's pretty pathetic.
Well, I mean, that front porch is very much, you know, it's clear that that was an additional thing, and it was done pretty poorly. But if you were to remove that, I'm sure you could see that there was a very distinct rhythm to the front of that building that was, you know, either ABA or AAA, or, you know, some kind of rhythm that made a lot of sense, and that was a characteristic of Greek revival, which is what I would say probably 90% of the buildings in the neighborhood are, or at least were at one point.
I just wanted to echo what Chair Miller said about the windows on the upper left side, the large windows, that they seem a little inconsistent with the other windows from the front. So whether it's trim or some other way to make them a little less prominent or more consistent with this kind of the design of the other windows, I agree with that. I think that makes sense.
Good.
I have to agree with that too. If some of the larger panes could be broken up with smaller panes, and the doors that appear to be sliders could turn into French doors, I think that it would fit the Old Town style a lot better, if those are possible to acquire.
It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, certainly on the front facing yacht, great. The windows that face the pool courtyard, because they are not visible from the street in general, they're well shielded. They look at each other, and there's a overhang and a porch. We're hoping to be able to maintain the outward feel, inward look, without having to chop those up into 1,000 panes.
So I don't have any issue with those the windows on the west elevation. In fact, they seem proportionate to one another. When it was presented to us initially, it said that the windows on the east elevation of the ADU were meant to mirror this. I thought, gee, they don't look like they're mirroring that at all. In fact, they look a little bit more prominent than those that are on what I would consider the main dwelling. They're higher. They've got a clear story above them. It's just.
I can only say that as the ADU has evolved over time, the configuration of the rooms, where the bedrooms are located, et cetera, has moved around quite a bit. And so we end up having to separate the function there, and to try to avoid having 100% of the interior of that ADU just be glass. Kind of looks this way, and to have a little higher ceiling and not let the light in up above seemed inappropriate. So again, we felt since it faced the other part of the house as opposed to the street, and it's well shielded, it didn't feel like it was inconsistent with the area or what we were trying to accomplish.
Ivan, when we're looking at the west elevation on this page, it appears that there's like a flat board detail at just at the header height of the window and the door. And then
just a drafting error for some reason. It didn't print. It's all horizontal siding all the way.
Okay, so what I'm seeing there is not intended.
It's
not a trim piece.
It's a missing line on the siding for some reason.
Okay.
In terms of the windows on the back of the house, I do defer to Chair Miller a little bit on the historic district sort of aesthetic, but because they're not visible, and I personally love light and have always wanted to have windows like that would open up to that backyard or pool, they don't particularly bother me, and because I do think it would be a nice feature for the people living in the house. But I understand some of the aesthetic issues, but it would seem kind of tough to put in French doors when you could have such kind of more open views in terms of living in the house, I guess, especially since it's not visible from the street.
Ivan, I'm seeing there is a flatboard detail above the columns on the west and I'm going to call it the first quarter of the south elevation on the rear. That is not a missing line, that is a detail.
That is correct. So around the porch on the back and the front, there's a flatboard that runs.
Did you consider running that all the way to the front of the building and using that as like a common detail around the building? You got it on half of the front of the house.
It was just around the porch, but yes, I can consider that.
Okay.
Probably look pretty good. I think it's a good suggestion, Ivan.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to offer too, though, that porch with a beam, an exposed beam, is kind of a traditional look around town too. So not wrapping the beam and leaving it one piece is kind of a normal look. It's what I would expect to see personally.
So it sounds like we're making a little bit of progress. Stephen, do you want to take it keep going in a particular direction, or do you want to, we still need to get input on the approval of the number of auxiliary structures?
I'm of the mind that I'm still uncomfortable with the massing over the rear balcony, the massing of the roof line on the rear.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in my mind, there's a give and take that could happen with approval of the auxiliary structures if there was a kind of a pullback on that extension of the roof over the balcony on the back.
And that's whether you feel that this doesn't impose, I mean, like the applicant and Ivan said that they, okay.
Yeah, I'm not so concerned about the neighbors. I'm more concerned about how much building this is going to appear to have on a bigger lot, but with two, I would almost characterize the ADU as being a full house. It's a large ADU. It's a 2-bedroom. You know, it's like a second house, and it just feels like there's a lot of structure on this. You know, it is a larger lot than what you see in Yountville and in Old Town, but it's still a rather small lot for two sizable buildings.
If we remove the covered porch on the second floor of the balcony, would a trellis be acceptable, just to provide some definition to the porch?
Yeah. What's the depth of that, Ivan?
Excuse me? The depth of the entire porch is 10 feet, but we can reduce it to 6 feet and eliminate the roof line, perhaps with a trellis or something similar to that.
My only comment would be there's a 50, 60-foot redwood tree in front of it. Nobody sees it anyway. It's only a benefit to the people that are using that upstairs bedroom to have a place to, enjoy really. But I don't mind cutting that back, but from a practical standpoint, the request for a pergola, a fireplace, and a pool on a lot of this size in this environment is not certainly very egregious or excessive.
Well, it does exceed the minimum. I mean, I'm sorry, the maximum.
No, I understand.
Without approval.
And Diane, let me ask, which fireplace are we talking about? The one that's under the covered deck or the one that's under the pergola?
Yeah, the deck.
Got it. And just to re-clarify something that was listed earlier, at one point we had two arbor type entrances, one at the front and one on the side. And what you're saying at the present is the one along Monroe Street has been eliminated. We can put gates in there, but not an arbor type entrance. Is that correct?
Yes, well, it didn't, you don't show it on the most of the most current plans, so I couldn't include it as part of the proposal because I couldn't tell whether, it seemed that you had eliminated that from the proposed project.
I don't think that that was intentional on our part, but I guess I would ask how the board feels about having an entrance along the Redwood side there that's more usable for the ADU that looks like something more than a back gate. I'll call it.
Would that cross over the public?
Similar to the
storm drain, or?
No, it doesn't have to. I mean, there's access from the street through the fence to the fence anyway. You have to be able to get through there. The storm drain is intended to go underground there too. So.
For the members of the ZDRB's benefit, there is no requirement. You could actually even do up to a 6 foot tall fence because it's a corner lot once it gets past the, I think, 20 feet. So a small
35.
arbor, 35 feet because it's a corner lot. If you had a small arbor for the ADU to access, that would be fine from a design, from a zoning ordinance compliance.
So if to try to keep everybody's time here, if I would just move this along, I would say from our standpoint, the oak tree protection, the way that the staff has approved it as presented it is fine with us. We understand the issue as it evolves with the tree protection. May have to come back and revisit that, but at least there's a mechanism to do that. The front, I'll call it patio type sliders, are going to be upgraded and replaced to staff's approval with something that's more in keeping with the discussion that we've had today. The aft balcony on the main house, the overhang is going to be shortened by 4 feet. The utility pieces that Diane brought up will be screened or put in an appropriate place. Those will follow the code and be compliant there. We would ask for approval of the pergola, an arbor if we need to put that in there, the fireplace and the pool as shown. I think that covers the open items, but I'm not going to be presumptuous. I was just trying to summarize where we are on all this right now to try to keep things moving forward.
That's really helpful.
That was great. That
Thank
was what I had. That's what I have listed.
I actually have a little bit more. I have roof pitch. 8 and 12 is more consistent with Old Town. And this is a blend of 6 and 12 and 8 and 12. I don't know if the board wants to provide direction to the applicant on that.
Christy, while we're on that one, I think maybe Ivan should weigh in there. I think we went to 8 and 12 where we could, but there's elevation issues if you try to do more than where we've done it. Is that true, Ivan, or is there still more opportunities for 8 and 12?
Part of it is height restriction, keeping the building as low as possible and still provide some decent roof slope. The lower roof is 6 and 12 in order to provide space for the windows on the second floor.
So I think
you can revisit that one, but it's pretty complicated to do on this call, Christy, when you start figuring out when, where, and how you can move that roof pitch around.
Yeah, I just wanted to summarize all the issues so that the board could deliberate on how they would like to provide direction for you to proceed.
Perfect.
The other element that I had as a note was, I called it the consistency of windows and shutters on the street elevations.
Yeah.
I don't know if the board would like to give the applicant direction on that.
I'm not quite sure what to say about that, because it's clear, looking at this north elevation, there's not really an opportunity to put shutters on that one window that is not like the others on this elevation.
Can I make a suggestion that we
Yeah.
can reduce that to a smaller window instead of 2 windows, smaller windows, and provide shutters?
And make them divided light?
Correct.
I'd be happy with that. I always think that those really wide shutters look like they're artificial, but I think it's part of our ordinance. I wouldn't, well, it would be lovely if the upper windows and the lower windows were pulled into alignment and the shutters and the windows lined up with each other. And I don't see you being able to do that, but it just.
We worked on that one a lot. Unfortunately, there's no other good place to put that stairwell up in the front. And
I see. Okay.
It boogers up the front porch and it boogers up that front corner, but we did the best we could to try to be.
I'm talking about the 2 pairs on the upper level underneath that gable, and then the lower windows. I can't read what it says under there.
Okay, got it. You were talking about on the above the kitchen window.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reducing the window size, we can reduce the roof structure and align the 2 windows, front, lower and upper windows.
Yep, that's agreeable.
I'm sorry, what, could you repeat that one?
That the
To
upper,
align which one?
The upper windows that have the roof on it in bedroom number 2, I think, or number 1, that those windows are going to be aligned with the lower windows in the dining room.
Oh, you can do that?
I think
so. That's great.
Yeah, so that's on the north elevation, Christy.
Yep, got it.
What else is on your list, Christy?
Diane, if you could just go straight back to the street elevation. I just wanted to confirm that I understood the direction, that is the upper window underneath the second floor eave, is that going to have shutters as well for consistency?
I think there would be enough space to do that, yes. We're going to change those doors to French doors with shutters.
Chair, I took notes if you'd like me to summarize.
That would be great.
So the applicant has agreed to the oak tree preservation. The condition of approval would be at time of building permit that the applicant would prove to staff that the location of the ADU complies with the tree preservation ordinance. The front sliders on the east elevation will be replaced with divided light. The half balcony on the rear elevation will be shortened by 4 feet and the roof removed. The applicant also agreed to screen the utility and place it in a compliant location. The applicant has requested to keep the pergola and have the ability of having an arbor entrance for the ADU off Monroe. The consistency of windows alignment on the north elevation that we just discussed, he's going to align the upper and the lower and add shutters. And that's all I have.
Just one point of note, when you said that the sliders are going to be replaced with divided light, I think those are swinging doors, French doors.
French, okay.
Okay.
Oh,
that's on the front.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think we're at a stage where the ZDRB can make one of 3 options. Obviously, you could continue it and ask the applicant to make these presentations to the next ZDRB hearing. It is coming up very soon. July 12th is your next hearing. I don't know if the applicant has the ability to make those changes for the action. For it to be continued in your action, you would have to make that action. Otherwise, we would have to renotice it. So that would mean the applicant would need a full, complete application back to us by Friday of this week. That seems like a lot of effort, but only the applicant will know if that's doable. Then the other option would be to continue it to the next CDRB meeting, which would need to be noticed, and that would have more flexibility of timing. The other element is the ZDRB could recommend that staff include these recommended changes that we just listed. And then thirdly, the ZDRB could make a motion to deny the application. If the ZDRB is in a position that that's where they're leaning to, I would need to return on July 12th with the legal findings and a resolution to do that. So the action wouldn't be able to take place tonight. It would need to be given staff direction.
Ivan, how can you weigh in on whether or not you'd be able to meet a Friday deadline, or whether you'd need it to continue to the following meeting?
I will make it by Friday.
Then I would move to give Ivan the opportunity to revise the plans with the noted changes and adjustments, and return to us for the July, what did we say, July 12th meeting?
Correct. And since we have the luxury of Mr. Bell, our town attorney, on the line, Gary, can you please confirm that if the action states when it's continued to, if we would have to publicly notice or not?
Yes, and thank you, ZDRB, for having me here tonight. It's good to see you all. That is correct. So if you continue it to a date certain, to the specific date and meeting, then it does not need to be renoticed. The hearing will continue on that date without further notice.
Thank you.
So, Christy, may I just ask, do we have exposure to a whole bunch of new stuff on the 12th, or are we simply going to be recapping whether we've conformed to the agreements that we've created today?
Well, they would be making their final and complete action. I think they've given you very clear direction of what they're comfortable with. I can't say for certain because we didn't exhaust all of the elements, but the final action would take place on July 12th.
And the commission or the board is not typically in a position to take the agreements that are created today and act on them without having it all brought back again for another relook?
I think you've received some positive direction. I think they need to see it probably one more time in its completeness before they can make that final action. I can't speak on behalf of them, but my limited understanding of how I've worked with them in the past, they are not known to take another bite of the apple, if that's what you're concerned about.
Yeah, no, just because we've been at this for such a long time, and every time we go away and everybody puts their head on the pillow and then wakes up the next day, other stuff, new stuff comes up, and it's all integrated. So,
and Terry, in all due respect, typically we're in the middle of a public hearing and there was just a motion, so it's kind of stalled right now. I just want to respect that there is a.
Got it. I'm back to mute.
So since we're on Zoom, it will be a roll call vote. What I've heard is a motion from Chair Miller to direct the architect based on the direction given tonight.
I'll second that motion.
Motion second by Tripp. All in favor?
Aye.
Vice Chair Jordan voted yes. So there was a 3-vote in favor. 2 members are recused, and we'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
All right, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate your public service as well. Thanks
Thank you.
to the staff as well.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Excellent.
All right, we've brought Mr. Zagorczyk and Cook back into the Zoom hearing. For everyone's benefit, I want to acknowledge that we have Mr. Gary Bell on our Zoom call today. What we are going to move forward to, and I hope you don't mind, I might go relatively fast because Mr. Bell has a hard stop at about, what, 5 minutes to 8, 10 minutes to 8? You're on mute.
Yes, probably about 10 minutes to 8. It might be easier, assuming you've all looked at the agenda packet and taken a look at those ordinances. If there's specific questions that you have on any of those, I don't want to jump ahead of the line here, but I also want to be useful if you guys need me.
Well, I have a question, but I'll defer to the chair if it's time for questions. Is it okay?
So yeah, Chair Miller, just to be clear, we've got Gary for about 15 minutes, and I can either start my presentation and kind of give everybody a big summary on all the requested ordinances, and you guys can interrupt me and ask questions to Gary at the time, or if there's any compelling questions at the beginning. I did ask Gary to join today because there is a lot of recent state laws that we are responding to, and this will be a formal resolution recommending with comments to the town council for their July 19th meeting.
I think a summarization would be very helpful.
Okay. If I can just. Okay, can everybody see my presentation except for I'm on the end? So I hope you don't mind. I already can talk fast, so I will talk fast so that we can take advantage of Gary. But what we're here tonight for is multiple zoning ordinance amendments, additions, and a request to rezone a particular property. We are looking for a recommendation from the ZDRB as part of the new zoning ordinance. Any changes to the municipal code requires formal written recommendations from the ZDRB to the town council. Tonight we are looking, sorry, I'm trying to get my, there we go. Tonight we are looking to amend the ADU ordinance, which actually has the majority of changes that I think we'll probably spend the majority of time on. The good news is we're adding a new chapter, which you've already heard and seen. This is the response to SB 9, the 2 dwelling and urban lot splits. We adopted a urgency ordinance at the beginning of the year, and we're offering 2 minor changes. We're adding a new chapter to respond to state law. We're amending a section of the affordable housing overlay to comply with the requirement of the housing element. We're requesting to add a new chapter called RM2 to allow a higher density and an amendment to the zoning map. So you guys remember we had a very lengthy conversation March 8th about these things called objective standards. Staff is recommending a lot of these things, some of the things that we discussed tonight, and the does it comply, yes or no, for many reasons, which Gary can go into more detail if you wish. I'm proposing a public meeting to discuss these into more depth in the fall at your October meeting. And then since we discussed our objective standards, staff did bring a request to the town council to give direction on the height and story limit of ADUs. And the ultimate direction was to not change the current objective standard as it governs and keep the height limitations of the ADU as is. Again, this is what's going to take the majority of time tonight is the requested amendments to the ADU ordinance. As you guys saw tonight, as you guys saw at the last 2, the Keeley restaurant, the Keeley residential development on Yonge Street, 6630, the most recent parcels that we've seen develop with an ADU, it maximizes the size limit, which is currently 1,200. We are asking to change that. We are suggesting to consider to change that to 800 square feet to limit this conversation of massing. We are furthering the definition of this junior ADU to be within, contained entirely within the structure and be a maximum of 500 square feet. And this is the biggest overarching concept that has been, I think, a lesson from our project earlier is this conversation of lot coverage. State law allows you to govern lot coverage and not necessarily floor area of all these additional residential units. So we have now requested to add a definition of lot coverage. We are also clearly defining that there can't be any shared access between the ADU and the primary. And this is the conversation that we had talked about do we want the color to be contrasting and harmonizing? And we can talk about this later, but this is something we are asking to put off until the October meeting to really better understand, can you talk about color? Can it be objective? And Gary can describe, I consulted with him after the March meeting and said, hey, the ZDRB wants to do this contrasting and harmony for the ADU or any additional residential units on the same property. And Gary said, that's going to be really difficult because you're allowed design review for the primary and not the ADU. So we attempted to respond to your request, but we're actually suggesting that we keep it the same so that it has similar architecture and color themes, and then have a larger, broader, more conversation as it relates to the objective standards in October. Gary, did you want to add anything?
I think that covers that for now. Happy to answer questions.
Okay. So this just kind of cleans up the timing, the development standards. I want to reiterate that this is probably the most important element of the state ADU law. Nothing in our zoning section shall prohibit an ADU that is at least 800 square feet, 16 feet in height, and constructed in compliance. So this will always be in our code. This will always be an element that staff will have to address. Okay. This is an easier one. This is, there's 5 parcels right now in the town of Yountville that have this affordable housing overlay. 3 of them have already been developed with the density bonus afforded by the affordable housing and have affordable housing on it as it exists. There's 2 parcels that remain. One is the Catholic Church property and one is the French Laundry Garden. And we are proposing to codify when the AHO is applied to a site that has PC, there is a requirement of 3.5 housing units per acre for affordable households. This would put a zoning requirement. It's already a requirement for any future development, but this is to further bolster our upcoming submission to the state for a housing element to show that the zoning requires this. This is our 3rd request. We're adding, this is the SB9 urgency ordinance that we're requesting to codify pretty much identical into our code. It adds 2 sections, the definition of lot coverage, and that lot coverage shall be no greater than 60%. This is again in alignment with state law, is not current in our urgency ordinance, and we are following this theme throughout all these housing bills. This is another request in response to recent state law, AB 803. It's called small home lot developments. I kind of consider it as like this small home. So it'd be a small home on a small lot for sale. There's only one vacant parcel. It's the Catholic Church parcel that would qualify for the small lot home development. And because it is currently relied upon for our housing element, it wouldn't qualify. So we can go into detail on this, or we can just accept that it's highly unlikely that any development would happen. The other thing that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is that if somebody does request a small home lot development, it has to be at the max density. That's going to be very difficult to meet if that parcel is rezoned to 20 units to the acre, simply because to do the math for a house and a lot and a street, you're not going to be able to get that 20 units to the acre with this type of development style. 5th request is to add a new chapter, a new zoning district called RM2. It's identical to RM except for the density. For the site to be included in the housing element, the state requires 20 units to acre. It is currently zoned 10 units to acre, so we are requesting a new RM2 RM2 zone that allows up to 20 units per acre. And then if adopted, we are requesting that the Catholic Church property be rezoned to RM2. There is a very important conversation that we'd like to have while Gary's on the phone. Is right now this is zoned RM. We are requesting the ZDRB consider rezoning it to RM2. It would allow an increased density by zoning of 20 units to acre. Because it still has that AHO overlay, it allows up to 150% density increase. That means that 20 units per acre could become 50 units to acre if we don't remove the AHO. So we have two options here. One, the ZDRB could recommend to the town council to rezone it to RM2 and rezone it to and remove the AHO overlay. That would bring it in conformity with the general plan that allows up to 25 units to acre, or direct the town council to actually amend the general plan to increase the density on that parcel. Staff suggests removal of the AHO. It remains in compliance with state law, and it remains in compliance for the housing element. And we've got 3 minutes of Gary's time, so I hope that was enough of a summary so you guys could ask the questions and get some direction from him if you need it.
I have one quick question. You mentioned lot coverage and no shared access for ADUs. Mm-hmm. Limiting lot access, and what does no shared access mean?
Right now, there's been some requests. Can I add an ADU and connect it to my main house with the door?
I see, shared interior access. Okay.
And we're making it explicit? No. A junior ADU may, because it has to share some of the facilities, but it has to be within the same footprint of the house. It can't be separate. And then the ADU can be attached or detached with no interior access.
Right. But the shared access makes it a JADU and limits the size.
Correct. And the scope of it has to be within the primary, the body of the primary unit.
Okay.
Okay, so that's my question right there. I'm a little confused because I thought I heard that it had to be within the body of the primary unit. And then I think I saw somewhere that it could be 150 feet larger. So I'm a little confused on that. Could you just clarify that on the junior ADU?
Yeah, so those requirements come right from state law, two separate statutes. One deals with ADUs, one deals with JADUs. JADU law says has to be within the existing single family home or primary residence and up to 150 square foot addition to that. So no more than that 150 square foot addition when doing a JADU.
Okay, and so that's what the new ordinance would say, no more than 150. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. And I just want to make a general comment. I totally like the lot coverage addition. I think that's really a good idea.
I had a question about the lot coverage specifically to SB 9. Last time we talked about it, the language of SB 9 was designed to be forceful, right? For state reasons, to the point where setbacks were, not to be considered, like unenforceable. So it's I'm surprised to see that we would be able to introduce a lot coverage stipulation when we were talking about how setbacks for SB 9 would not be enforceable.
Yeah, happy to take that. So SB 9, like a lot of the other state laws right now, are requiring that you apply objective standards to the application. You can continue to apply all objective standards, lot coverage being one of them. 60% is either met or it's not met. So like any other objective standard though, it has to give way if needed to put in the minimum lots that are allowed under SB 9 and under the ordinance that's being considered for your recommendation to the town council tonight. It doesn't totally go away, but it's conceivable if you had the right small lot and someone came in with an SB 9 application and said, I want my 2 units on this lot, and it required 65% lot coverage or 64. The town and the ZDRB would have to allow that application to go through. town staff would have to allow that application to go through, because all objective standards have to give way to get those minimum units in. The ordinance sets it at 800 square foot maximum and minimum, so that's the limit. So 2 of those on a lot, conceivably, if the lot was the right configuration to require that you waive some percentage of the lot coverage, it would have to give way to let the units go in.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
So my other question, Kirsty, is especially given that we're seeing these 1,200 square foot ADUs, which I just think that's too much. How does that, how do people applying for those 1,200 square foot ADUs interface, or maybe Gary could say, with us recommending this ordinance and then the town council approving it? How does that work?
Are you referring to current applications that are proposing a 1,200 square foot ADU?
Exactly. We considered one tonight. Exactly.
Right. So applications that have already been submitted and gone through the process have been deemed complete, and they have the right to operate under the old rules, not the ordinance that's being proposed now. So this ordinance, we're recommended to go through, and if the town council adopted it in its current form, there'd be a first and a second reading, 2 separate meetings, and then it would take effect 30 days after the second reading. Still quite a ways out. If this went on the current track, it's still 60 days out or so, maybe a bit less.
And at this point, we have no applications that are complete besides the one that you saw tonight under the current legislation. I wanted to respect Gary's time. He has another meeting, if you can believe it, at 8 o'clock. So if anybody has any other questions for him, I'd like to let him go to his 8 o'clock meeting.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
All right,
Gary.
thanks, Gary. Good luck. So we can keep talking. I can answer as much as I can. I thought Gary would be helpful. I did want to highlight to the ZDRB, you're going to start to see a lot of resolutions on your projects. It is one of the indirect consequences by the way the language happened in the Zoto consolidation. Some of these written recommendations to the council, the meetings between the ZDRB and the council are going to start to be longer because we have to develop these written recommendations, and that's going to come in alignment with a draft resolution. So what you see in your staff report tonight is a copy verbatim of every single one of the ordinances that we're recommending to the town council. As described, the 2 biggest ones that I'd like your deliberation and direction, and I think the council will appreciate, is 1, the lot coverage, 2, the ADU multiple changes, and I can bring my screen back up and we can go through them in more detail. And then also the conversation about removing the AHO overlay from the Catholic Church site. It wasn't, first of all, I need to let the ZDRB know that my notice actually had a typo in the Fennell address. It was brought to my attention. I addressed it. The notice still went out to everybody, and it doesn't really affect those 3 other AHO parcels. It only affects the 1 parcel that was adequately noticed. But the second notice for the town council will include your ultimate recommendations. And moving forward, you guys are going to start to see more of those formal resolutions that we'll be asking Chair Miller to sign with whatever directions provided. Then I'll follow up with a DocuSign for you in the next day or so. So do you guys want to start with the ADU changes and kind of walk through? I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back there. Okay, so the biggest change that we are requesting is the ADU. To answer Commissioner Tripp's request, the actual ordinance does show that allowance of the 150 square feet, and it's primarily for access. What this is doing is furthering that it must be contained entirely within the existing structure. This is for both an existing structure and if somebody were to propose a new one. it still would have to be within that structure. Maximum of 500 square feet can be attached to the structure. It does allow that additional 150 square feet for access and for other elements. Entirely exempt from floor area ratio. Because the FAR is entirely exempt for an ADU, we've seen this trend that every ADU is 1,200 square feet. Because we can't restrict it, we can't restrict the FAR to limit it to 800 square feet. Staff is proposing that we change the size of an ADU for the town of Yountville to 800 square feet. That is in compliance with state law.
And that's under lot coverage.
No, this is the entire floor area of ADUs will now be 800 square feet.
I see, okay.
What precipitated the desire to change it from 1,200 to 800?
That we started seeing what we saw tonight with folks coming in with development plans that basically builds out the primary unit to the maximum floor area ratio, and then takes advantage of the FAR exemption of the ADU and goes to the entirety of the 1,200. Because most ADUs for new construction is limited to one floor, the lot coverage, it started to build out the lot. So we're still going to require a lot coverage of 60%, but as Gary mentioned, you can't deny it if it doesn't meet the lot coverage. If we restrict the floor area of an ADU to 800 square feet, that's the objective standard. Either it's 800 square feet or not.
I wonder.
I really like that, but that's just me.
Me
and
too.
I think what you're saying, Kirsty, is that if push came to shove, if someone was bumping up against the 60% versus the 800 square feet, that's a given, basically.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I couldn't deny something if it didn't meet the lot coverage, but I can deny something that is over the required square footage of the ADU in compliance with state law.
I think that's very important, personally.
Mm-hmm.
I agree 100% with both of those. I'm really disappointed with these projects that we're seeing where everybody builds everything out to the nth degree and 4,000 square feet and 6 bedrooms. And obviously these ADUs that are being built are guest houses. They're not ADUs, they're not being rented. Is there any way to make it so that the ADU is actually separated, not sharing the pool with the house, so that it's not a guest house, so that it's actually an additional dwelling unit that somebody could rent and use, instead of just exploiting our laws to make a guest house?
It already requires direct access.
To what?
To like the street, direct access to the parking. I don't think we could say the ADU can't enjoy the yard. If anything, the ADU is required to have
100 square feet, but not the pool and the fire pit and the house and all that. Any way to make it so that it more fits the intent of the law and to provide additional housing?
You know, we just had this conversation with Gary today, and he said something like, "Oh, Diane, you're expecting that this has intellect."
Yeah, been thought through.
He said you're applying logic to the law.
Yes.
Because I was literally having this conversation earlier.
Yeah.
So we're doing the best we can with the strict requirements.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Kirsty's certainly the expert, and Diane, but based on what I've read, you can't force people not to do just what they're doing, which is use this as a way to get a bigger house. Can't right now, you can't really force them to rent it.
And our climate is such that it's okay if it's detached and you have a pergola between it. You just walk back and forth.
Is there any way to make the required 100 square feet larger, or does that come with the ADU?
ordinances.
I don't think you can. You can't require something that is more aggressive. The only thing that you can do is this objective standard.
I think the limiting it to 800 square feet goes a long way. Just that 400 square feet makes a big difference.
It really does, especially when, for the most part, they're gonna stay one story unless the primary is 2-story and it complies with the other requirements, which is going to be rare.
Yeah. Now, wasn't there supposed to be some discussion about the 2nd story?
We had it at town council. I just wanted to know if the town council had an appetite for it so that when I presented it to you, we could come up with something creative. I didn't really catch an appetite of them. So at this point, it's remained unchanged, which in some ways does contribute to the full build out of the lot, because most likely everyone's going to take advantage of this. And with it being limited to the 1 story, what you saw tonight is, and that's a big lot, is the footprint. I mean, it's going to be a little bit smaller because it'll be limited to 800. But I think the height limit, and this is something you could give a direction to the town council on, in the event, you know, it maxes out the open space of the lot, there should be some consideration for an exception. I wanted to offer a certain exception if it met the 50% limit, and if it wasn't, you know, didn't impact a direct neighbor, that there could be this exception process through this ADRB. In some ways, in some of the you know, we get a lot of kind of pie in the sky ideas. Diane and I will always offer, and please encourage this throughout the town. We offer an hour of our time and a pre-application, totally casual. Give us a call, give us the address, give us what you're wanting to do. We'll do some analysis and then meet with the folks and really give them some clear direction. And in some cases, the ADU above the garage, to me, is a better land use choice. One, it feels more detached. It feels more separated from the main unit. It feels like it's more going to be intended for a rental unit. Mm-hmm. Whereas the way it says right now is you can have a 1-story house and a 1-story detached garage. You cannot do a 2-story ADU on top of that garage, but you can do a whole new 2-story ADU.
If you had a large enough lot.
No, you could go on top of your 1-story. So to me, it seems.
Oh, on top of your 1-story. Unless it met the 50% rule, it ran up against that.
Yes, but what it does is it allows you to have now a more massive structure above your entire house rather than just above your garage.
But to me, that makes a lot more sense visually, walking down a street, seeing a 2-story house, than seeing a 1-story house with a skinny, tall 2-story garage. Because a small 1-story house in our neighborhood generally has a 1-car garage. So now you have a 15-foot 2-story building that doesn't match the house. So I would rather see a 2nd story added to the house.
Yeah, I would too. I know the town council has spoken on this, but I would rather see a ADU go up on top of the house and you know, we live in different neighborhoods. I'm more in more of a subdivision neighborhood, but I would rather see the ADU go on top and a 2nd floor than to cover the entire lot. I mean, so for what that's worth.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree.
So I'd like to add a little something about the ADU size. First off, I'd like to say, I don't believe it's within our purview to try and decide how the ADU gets used. We live in a very strange market here where there's a lot of wealth, there's a lot of people that can afford it. The whole purpose behind that was just to create more housing. And what I like to say is, it would seem to me that taking away the ability to build a 1,200 square foot ADU might also limit the desirability of that unit as a rental. If I had the money and the land to build that, I would want the bigger unit because it'd be more desirable as a rental and it would probably get more income. So there is another side to this other than just saying, I don't want to see big homes.
Except for that, the idea is that it's supposed to be affordable units, and the bigger you make the ADU, the more it rents for. You're going to get $3,000 for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath ADU, and that defeats the whole point of what adding additional workforce housing is.
But would it not be more desirable in the open market for a rental than a little bitty cottage?
Probably not. Most workforce people don't have.
If you were married and had a child and wanted to live in Yountville so you can go to work at RH, there's other things to consider here than just the idea that it's not getting used for what it's supposed to be used for, what we think it should be used for. The objective was to create more housing, period.
Yeah, but not add guest houses. That's also becoming the problem.
Or pool houses.
Where does it say?
Right. Pool houses. One of them is like that.
I agree with you, Michael, except that the state has come down pretty stringently upon us, and they've said we can limit it to 800. So if they really wanted 2-bedroom units, they would have told us 1,200. But I do understand what you're saying. There's a limit, especially in a town with small lots, how much you can squeeze on these lots. That's just my opinion, but I hear what you're saying.
Oh, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Hillary. I think realistically in this town, especially in Old Town where the lots are so small, you're not going to see a lot of people fit 1,200 square feet behind their existing homes. It's just not going to happen. But I do think that we're kind of overstepping our bounds by trying to make decisions about how these things get used. It's not really our place, in my opinion.
Yes, I agree. I don't think
I disagree.
We can't limit how it's going to be used, and there is no request to limit how it's going to be used. The current ordinance says an ADU must be rented for 3 months minimum, and that is compliant with state law, and that is not changing. Right. So the only changes that I outlined here are the actual changes that either I've already brought to you or that are actually proposed to be changes.
Well, I think if we're talking about the 1,200 versus 800, I think the discussion about whether or not we have the purview of telling people how to use it. I don't think we're telling people how to use it. I think we're established to help the laws that have been put into place be applied. And what we're looking at is that in Yountville, at 1,200 square feet, people just have a bigger pool house or a bigger guest house. And that's not the way that the law was written. It's not what it was trying to influence. It was trying to get a greater housing market.
Okay, but consider if you go from 12 to 800, I'll bet you money, statistically, you are automatically eliminating 1 bedroom from that unit. So that's one more person that can live theoretically in town.
I think that's wishful thinking. I think it just means that, that people have a smaller pool house or a smaller guest house. They're only going to have a couple instead of 2 couples, which you never have anyway.
I'm generally in the camp that, the guidelines and the laws are there to create possibilities. They're not there to enforce behavior, right? Incentivizing ADUs means there is another structure with a kitchen, that's a fully standalone unit. It may be that whoever builds it uses it as a guest house. It may be that the next person who buys the house rents it out. But the point is, if that ADU were never there in the first place, there's 0 chance of it ever becoming anything, right? So it's all about creating possibilities.
Exactly.
The state isn't going to prevent people from owning multiple houses. So if you wanted to buy 10 houses, you can buy 10 houses. We're not going to sit there and say, actually, you can only own 1 house, and because that's the freedom of living in this country. There already are requirements for the ADU, which is obviously it has to be a standalone unit, access to the street. So for us, it's really a conversation about what other things can we do that make it, more likely to be rentable, regardless of how it's actually used.
Well, and Christy, when you just said that it is on the books that it's required to be rented 3 months out of the year, how is that reviewed or
so first of all, there's no requirement for it to be rented. The requirement is if you are going to rent it, you must rent it for at least 90 days. The intention of that, and that's not being requested to be changed. I see a double-edged sword in that. One, an interesting element came out of a focus group with the industry as part of the housing element. And one of their directions were, we have transient staff, or we have staff come, we influence staff to come to our establishment. And while they're looking for a house, sometimes these folks come from different countries. They might not have credit. They need like this transition for a month or two where they're getting comfortable, they're getting used to everything. They want to know, they've determined where they want to live. They, you know, try out the new job, decide to stay. And so there is this, it's not really a transient workforce. It's a kind of a flexible rental. And I think the 90 days actually is a limitation to, because I think it actually limits the people who may be open to renting to people in this transitionary period for a month or two. So I mean, we can't require it to be rented. At this point, the way the current ADU ordinance reads, it's a deed restriction. So everybody who gets a ADU, when they construct it, they have to go to notarize it and put it on their deed and record it with the county recorder. So if they sell it, the new owner knows I have to rent this for 3 months minimum.
Well, is it 90 days consecutively or 90 days out of 365 that has to be
90 days consecutive, a minimum of 90 days. So if you had, like we have an ADU at our property. We're going to Europe for 3 weeks. It would be a perfect opportunity for me to rent it to somebody who needs a place for a couple months, but I'm not prepared to rent it long-term because we have lots of kids coming in and out. You know, people are, you know, teenagers that have fled the nest that come to visit, and we want to be able to provide it for them. So I think there's a lot of people in town that might have that same situation where they have an ADU, they use it as a home office, but hey, if they could help the right person out for a couple months to find this transitionary housing, you know, they don't want to be out of compliance with their requirement. So I see that going both ways. So I think what we've seen, Diane and I, when we do these pre-applications, is every single person who wants to do a typical Yountville development, which is demo the small cottage and build out, they're going to want to maximize their floor area exemptions. And what we've seen is if they can get it to 1,200 square feet, they will. And I think it results in a very built out lot, which the state doesn't care about. But I think it's a good fit for Yountville because it still meets the need of an ADU. For the most part, ADUs, I think a 2-bedroom ADU is a big ADU. So
I agree with your.
Oh, I was just going to say, I took that requirement of the state about 30 days to be in part to avoid people putting in ADUs just for Airbnb. No problem with Airbnb in particular, but some cities haven't adopted ordinances about Airbnb. And so this was the state's way of making sure they were actually, in theory, providing housing as opposed to Airbnb.
So just to be clear, any rental in Yountville is required to be, there's no short-term rentals allowed anywhere in Yountville.
Anyway, so
every rental has to be 30 days.
Right.
What the town council did when they adopted the ADU ordinance, and I don't know the history, maybe ZRB was involved in it, they furthered it to 90 days.
Oh,
90 days is allowed by state law. And my suggestion was, that's an existing requirement. And in some ways, I think it might deter some of the ADU owners from, you know, possibly providing, you know, short-term housing that's over 30 days to this workforce that we have. That's one of our needs in Yountville is the workforce housing. Mm-hmm. And for folks who, you know, fly into from France, need a place to stay for a couple months until they find something permanently. I think some of these current owners that may be using it as a pool house or a home office would be more open for that kind of filling that gap.
Yeah.
And that is a need of the current business community of the town.
So are we looking at all these different things today and then making suggestions back to town council? Because I could see suggesting that we remove the 90-day because you make a good argument for that. I agree with A, B, and C here on the screen. And then I would like to argue back what Hillary and I were talking about being able to see the ADU be allowed on a single-story house instead of the garage.
So I can quickly summarize. At this point, I have not included the 90-day, the conversation. I just wanted to share that. At this point, these are the changes that we're requesting. I think what I just heard is that most of the ZDRB, if not 4 of the members, might be comfortable with the new ADU size. It sounds like everyone's cool with the lot coverage concept. The height limit is not being changed. So right now you cannot do a 2nd story ADU for new construction. You cannot do an ADU atop a new garage. You have to do an ADU atop of an existing garage, and you have to have a 2-story house. So I think that remains unchanged. So at this point, what I'm asking for the ZDRB to formally vote on, and it being a roll call vote, is the draft resolution with any other direction. So
so I could make a motion. So we're doing it by topic, the ADU, or the whole thing?
At this point, the resolution combines everything.
Okay.
But I think it might be more helpful if we go by each topic. We'll call it 1 through 6, and then we can just do, and I can formalize your guys' direction, and then I'll revise the resolution to include your recommendations, and then Chair Miller will review it for accuracy and then sign it.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to accept number 1 that covers the accessory dwelling unit and the updates listed, and also proposed for discussion, allowing ADUs to be built above, to make it so that it's adding a 2nd story to a single family house instead of over the garage of a single family house.
That already exists.
Okay, that already. So
yeah,
make it an option for them to add it over. Yeah.
Okay, so I hear a motion.
Just to clarify, the motion is to approve the language as written, essentially.
Plus give direction to the town council to consider reducing the 90-day to 30-day to allow flexible.
Yes, okay, I second.
So I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Member Tripp?
Agree or approve?
Vice Chair Jordan?
Yes, I agree. This is only for item number 1, correct?
Yes, but it does include the size of the ADU.
No, then I disagree. Yeah.
Okay.
No for me.
Okay. And then Chair Miller, roll call vote.
Agree. Yes.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to the 2nd request. You guys understand the affordable housing overlay?
Could you just clarify, Kirsty, if we want more density, we should take off the overlay, or could you just make it very simple?
Okay, so we're not gonna go there yet. Right now, This is just a request to add this section E. So, sorry, I've got this new PowerPoint program and it jumps too fast. So this is in particular to the French Laundry Garden site. Big picture conversation in 2004 or thereabouts, it was rezoned from residential to commercial. At that time of the rezone, it put a requirement on future development that any future development would need to prove that they could build affordable housing. The French Laundry came in with an in project, it got approved, and their nexus was to come up with 13 new homes. So what staff did is took that, so basically 2 of them were rebuilt because there's 2 cottages on the property. So it was a net 11 affordable units that parcel were to bear. So we are relying on this project site, and we have relied on it on the last 2 housing elements. For us to continue to rely on it, it needs to be explicit zoning. So the zoning needs to be explicit. So right now, I would have to explain to the state, oh yes, it's a condition of approval, it's in the resolution that the new project would have to come up with it. We don't know how many units. It's a future thing. What this does is it makes it very, 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 very clear that any project that goes on this property would require 3.5 housing units per acre to be affordable. That equals the 11 that's already known. It's codified in, it's embedded into old resolutions, rather than it's still a known requirement, and it still be enforceable on a master development plan, but the state wouldn't buy it. The state's only going to buy it if they can read it in a code and see that that parcel could do it.
So we're just codifying what I think you're saying already exists.
Yes, we're putting it in the zoning ordinance rather than in a resolution when the zoning changed.
And this is good because for the housing element, so
yeah,
very important.
I'd like to make a motion that we.
Well, can I ask a question, please? So this applies to 2 properties, the Catholic Church property and the French Laundry, is that correct?
No, because the French Laundry site is the only one that's zoned PC, primary commercial. This only applies when AHO is on a primary commercial property.
Okay, because in the first paragraph, you're talking about 2 different properties.
Well, so there's 5 parcels in Yountville that has AHO. There's 2 left undeveloped, the French Laundry Garden site and the Catholic Church site.
The first paragraph is just context.
Okay.
So
yeah, we're not seeing the whole thing at one time. Okay.
If someone were to rezone the Catholic Church site to PC, this would qualify.
Oh, so this is only about PC. Okay. Does the property owner get any say? Do they know this is happening?
No, they've always known it.
Okay.
In fact,
that we're making this change.
This is just changing the language to be part of the official zoning. It's
exactly. It's a requirement for HCD, where before the last 2 housing elements, we could say in 2004, the resolution required. Now the HCD is like, we don't want any of that. I want to be able to look in the zoning code. I want to know where it applies, and I know how you're going to enforce it.
Okay.
And we're recommending to the council that they change it.
Yes.
Okay. I get it.
And yes, to answer whoever's question that was, the property owner is very aware of it. I've had many conversations. It's no surprise.
Great. I make a motion to approve as written.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion from Zagorczyk. We have a second from Chair Miller. Roll call vote. Commissioner Tripp?
Yes.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Jordan?
Yes.
Okay. All right, moving on. The third request is SB 9. You guys are very familiar with SB 9. We adopted an urgency ordinance, and what this is, this amendment is needed to codify the urgency ordinance into the formal zoning ordinance to establish the long-term objective standards. The only change staff is recommending to the urgency ordinance that would now be codified in our zoning code is lot coverage.
Yeah, I think we discussed this one quite extensively last time.
Yeah.
So, and then our town council clarified the impact of the lot coverage. So I thought that was a very clear answer. So
the town council.
Sorry, not the general council.
Oh yes, yes, yes. I was my last. I was trying to figure out a way to, and then yes, I'm very thrilled that we got this into. We married this in every single one of the housing ordinances that you see.
Yes. Okay. Great.
Any other questions?
No.
All right. Can somebody make a motion that there's no changes to the two dwelling unit and urban lot splits in response to SB 9, turning the urgency ordinance into a long-term ordinance with the inclusion of lot coverage?
I'll make that motion as long as I don't have to repeat it.
Okay, you got it.
I'll second it.
Second by Cook. Roll call vote. Vice Chair Jordan.
I agree.
And board member Zagorczyk.
Aye.
And Chair Miller.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Final one. This is the very strange one called small home lot developments. At first, I was kind of intrigued by it. I kind of thought of it like a mobile home park, but yet you would own the land, and obviously your house wouldn't have to be modular.
So this is a new ordinance?
This is you've never heard about this.
Okay,
this is Assembly Bill 803. It was effective January 1. Basically, somebody could do it now, but what we are doing is establishing these objective standards. So it's very clear. So if anybody were to do it, now the draft ordinance has all the list of objective standards. One, the multifamily development objective standards would comply. The way AB 803 reads is it can only be on a mixed residential or high density parcel. So as you guys know, we only have one remaining lot that's RM. Hopefully after we finish this conversation, zoned to RM2. So at this point, the only vacant lot that it would qualify for is one. And we are increasing that density to 20 units to the acre. So if you do the math, the 20 units to the acre, what's 43560 divided by 20? You're looking at minimum lot sizes of 2,178. So to get that minimum lot size and the small house with roads, it's going to be really difficult to meet. So
By the way, I think, Kirsty, you may have jumped ahead of the slide back. So. Oh, no, you didn't. You're back. I had a question, actually. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go for it.
Was there a previous slide? Did I see it was the size was up to 1,750? That doesn't feel very small.
No, not at all. I agree.
So
what's the purpose of this and what are they trying to accomplish?
Small homes on small lots.
This is what Yountville is.
I know, but they're saying, 2,000 square foot lots, 3,000 square foot lots, no FAR.
And Kirsty, that's just on things, the state agrees that it's just on things that are zoned multifamily residential right now?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
No, but also mixed residential, right?
Multifamily.
Oh,
our only multifamily zone is mixed residential, so I kind of mixed it.
Well, all of Washington Park is mixed residential. So nobody could do anything with a lot here, correct?
Washington Park is mixed residential.
That's why we're adding RM2.
Yes. Well, it's already developed. I mean,
does it preclude somebody tearing down a house and doing something different?
I think it's a minimum of, let me just look at the actual ordinance. I think it's a minimum size.
Which a lot of these lots probably are.
So this is AB 803. Can you guys see my screen still?
Yes.
Okay. So technically it can also be in all three of these zones with a use permit because it allows it. So it can't be on a housing element site, so it exempts the Catholic Church site. I think it said it needed a minimum. So here's the other thing. It requires the maximum zoning. So it's 1,700 is the final. We stuck in lot coverage.
You're not currently sharing your screen with us if you're showing us the AB 803.
Yeah.
Oh,
Here,
yeah.
Now can you see it?
We're seeing just your same PowerPoint.
Oh, sorry.
There.
It showed up on my screen, so
okay.
I didn't know that there was a button I had to push saying share my new screen.
So there's not like a like you have to be doing 4 lots at once or anything like that?
I remember.
It can be a single lot?
I thought it was.
It also includes Old Town Historic, right?
With a use permit. Because Old Town Historic allows multifamily with a use permit.
Okay.
So to answer your question, yes, it doesn't look like there's a minimum requirement.
I don't understand what they're trying to do. So you want to know, where it applies in town.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's pretty much similar to the urban lot split.
But I don't see any lot size guidelines. So it's just
lot size.
Standard
no minimum and no maximum lot size.
So what is it saying? That it could do?
Oh, can't exceed 5 acres.
Cannot exceed 5 acres. But somebody, I guess nobody's going to tear down one house and build another house, but I'm just not understanding how it applies.
Well, and it doesn't really apply to any vacant parcels currently in Yountville. What it does do is if somebody were to apply for it, there's objective standards already codified, because as you just heard from Gary, we have to determine an application complete within 30 days. So if somebody were to have a complete application without us adopting these, we wouldn't be able to enforce the objective standards of lot coverage, explicitly understanding the open space, limiting it to 800 and 1750. So there could be some more concessions that they could ultimately ask for.
Yeah, it seems to me that if you have a 4,000 square foot lot in Washington Park, you don't need to use this. You could just, and you wanted to take down the house, you could build your ADU and your, right. You could, there are other roads to go than.
I just wondered if somebody bought multiple lots, if it was actually providing anything different for them, but it doesn't sound like it is.
It's really set up for a subdivision. It's set up for a subdivision to allow small homes on small lots.
Which we already are. Okay. Seems to make sense.
Okay.
So I would make, unless, well, I don't want to jump in, but I could make a motion on this unless somebody else had more questions.
Nope.
Okay. So I would make a motion to go ahead and pass this resolution to add this to the zoning. the small home lot developments as proposed.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, Chair Miller, second. Motion by Tripp. Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Zagorczyk?
Aye.
And Jordan?
Yes.
All right, we're almost done. This is getting a little bit more complicated, so, no, not this so much. So as described, the state wants the zoning. So the whole aspect of the housing element is a land exercise. It's not like we're proving to the state that we're going to build. It's that we're proving that the zoning allows for exactly what we're saying that has the potential there. So the state is saying, if you're going to have affordable housing, you have to have the 20 units per acre, because the 20 units per acre by right creates a higher density, and by right could create more affordable housing. So all we're asking for is to add a new zoning chapter, mirror it on mixed residential. The only aspect that changes is the density. RM currently allows 8 units to the acre to a maximum of 10, and RM, if approved, will require 10 acres per minimum and a maximum of 20. For the housing element, we're anticipating that it's going to be developed at 15 or 16 units per acre, and that 30% would be at the different income levels because of the mixed the mixed residential requires 50%, single family, 25 multifamily, and 25 alternatives. So it requires this mixed type of multifamily development.
I motion to approve as written.
It has no ramifications to the property owner, to the current property owner?
It will if we get to the 6th request, which is to rezone it. And I can share that.
And have they been are they aware this is happening?
This is the church parcel.
Yeah.
This is this allows them, this would make them happy if they're out to maximize the use of the land in terms of the profits, right?
Oh, absolutely.
This allows higher density, so they're not likely, although you never know, to be upset.
We don't even know if they'll ever sell it, but yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure they're aware that this is happening.
Yes.
The intent of an ordinance like this is to allow flexibility.
That's all. Yeah. And by the way, this is the #1 reason we will meet our housing element.
Yes.
All of our eggs are in this basket.
So,
yes.
To me, we shouldn't mess with this.
No, that I understand. It's weird that the person whose property this is not involved.
Well, I think we're hearing they are involved.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
but this isn't the one in question. So I think this is just creating a new category. The next one
Yeah,
is
this is okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay.
I make a motion to approve as written in the interest of time.
Okay, I'll second that.
Chair Miller?
Yes, aye.
Vice Chair Jordan?
Yes.
And Member Tripp?
Yes.
Okay. So now we're moving on to if we get this RM2, as Zagorczyk mentioned, all of our eggs are in this basket. Again, the housing element requires you to prove by paper. It's a land exercise to show if we have to come up with 72 units, how are we going to do it? At this point, we are relying on this parcel to put our required RENA allotment on, primarily because both the Yountville Elementary School and the Veterans Home aren't to a level that we can rely on it, because it has to be a zoning by right. So we're really thinking that those 2 projects will probably happen before the Catholic Church property gets zoned. So again, this is a land exercise. The state wants this 20 units per acre. That would yield, we're anticipating about 4.5 acres being accounted for the housing element. But what we are asking the town is to rezone the entirety of the property, mainly because then it can be more attractive to a developer to have a larger piece of property if the church is willing to sell it. Currently, the general plan, when you guys did the Envision Yountville, it allows up to 25 units per acre if it's RM with AHO. So right now that parcel in the general plan allows up to 25 units per acre. If we do this to prepare for the housing element to bring the zoning to 20 units per acre, it creates an inconsistency with the general plan. So the AHO overlay, the whole primary component is to provide a local Yountville density bonus, which is at a higher level. I think the state density bonus allows 80%. And our zoning, our AHO density bonus allows 150%. So if an applicant wanted to come in and ask for the state density bonus, they still can. It's just that isn't required to be consistent with the general plan and zoning. That's a state requirement. Because we have a local Yountville density bonus, the AHO overlay, it creates that inconsistency. So we think that if somebody wants to provide, 80 or 100% affordable, they could still qualify for the state density bonus, which allows 80%, regardless of what we do. So we are suggesting to rezone the Catholic Church site to the RM2 zoning and remove the AHO.
And I suspect this is because when the AHO percentage was introduced, it wasn't built on top of a density level that we're seeing here initially. Right?
Yes.
So it made an assumption that density wouldn't go up, which meant the percentage overlay made sense. But now that the density is going up, it creates the inconsistency, but we still have the state. So to me, it's a correction.
Exactly. Any questions?
No, I'll make a motion to accept this one.
Okay.
A second.
Commissioner Tripp?
Aye.
Vice Chair Jordan?
Yes.
And Chair Miller?
Yes.
Okay, so basically everything, just to conclude, was as proposed, except for the council to consider reducing the 90 days to 30 days for an ADU rental.
And discussing the second story.
But the second story isn't
ADU.
changing.
Oh. No, but
could you convey our interest in that, or at least two of us are interested in allowing the second story?
Well, it already allows, so I just wanted
no, the second story on the main house.
Yeah.
Instead of the garage.
So that's already how it is. I just want to be very clear, height limits. So this is not changing. ADU shall not exceed 1 story or 16 feet in height, unless the ADU is contained within the existing legal 2-story space of a single-family detached dwelling units, added above or below an existing legal single-family detached dwelling unit, or added above an existing legal 1-story detached garage on a property with an existing legal 2-story single-family detached dwelling unit, and consistent with the height regulations of the 50%.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying they didn't. Okay.
So this is, I think this meets the objection, the intentions of both of you, and there's no changes. I think I'll be happy to share to the council that the ZDRB deliberated on the height limit of the ADU and agrees with the council to keep it as is.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. That concludes my 6th and final request.
Wonderful.
On to the next item. No, kidding.
That would be a motion to
dinner.
Adjourn. Motion to eat. A motion to
for dinner.
Stephen's already had dinner.
So the next meeting is the regular meeting of July 12th. So the adjournment would be to July 12th.
Okay.
So can I just ask a quick question? The joint meeting is with the council in July is for what purpose, Kirsty? Or can you, or is it appropriate to tell us?
Oh yeah, no, I'm happy to. We're going to show off our online building permits. So Friday we launch online building permits, and then You guys as ZDRB members, all you have to do is get an account to this program called OpenGov. And if you ever want to know what the status is on a property, you have full access to all of our building records starting February 1st. And it is our goal to actually transform all of our permits to be entirely within this portal. So you guys can see design plans that where things are at. So it's the first step in kind of automating a lot of our aspects in the planning and building department. So the first part of the joint meeting is for staff to introduce you to the program, get you comfortable to get your username and password, and start to access things through this portal. And that's going to be a quick 20-minute presentation. And the second part of the joint meeting is for us to showcase the draft housing element update, highlight basically no surprises. We've reviewed the administrative draft, and it's going to go to public review next week, July 8th, or in 2 weeks maybe. And then July 19th, it'll be another opportunity to hear public comment. It'll be another opportunity to both the ZDRB and the council to hear the final update, and then authorize staff to ultimately submit it to the state at the end of July.
Okay, thank you.
One question.
Oh, go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
Sorry. So the portal into the permit process, is that for you to just view your own permit in this process, or could it be for a project down the street?
It could be for a project down the street. You still need a username though.
Okay, so it's entering all this into the public record, then it's available to anybody?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you.
And we're even hoping to have past historical building permits.
Oh, wow. All right.
So in your portal, right now we have all of our building permits being scanned. And in your portal, you'll have past building permits and then current status. You can, all the plan check review comments will be on it. We all just downloaded Bluebeam, so it'll have a consolidated plan review. And then you can request your building inspections. And then it's also a transparency portal for neighbors.
Older records, entering records from the past too, or just going forward?
I'm hoping to do records from the past. It's a little bit more complicated. They're currently being scanned. All of our final documents will be put into Laserfish. I'm just trying to play with it a little bit more to find out if the past documents are going to be in the same records retention. I'd really like it. This public portal is really easy. It's user friendly. It's comfortable. It's easy to kind of call and response. It's going to be very easy for folks to kind of see it. It's going to link to GIS. So it's a very, it's going to be a really nice asset to the building department.
Can you confirm the date of this meeting?
July 19th.
Okay, I have it. All right.
What time?
You guys, I think it hasn't been confirmed. I think they want to see if you guys could show up at 5 rather than 5:30.
Okay,
but it
that's
hasn't been. Yeah. It's either 5 or 5:30.
Okay,
it's 5, I think.
Okay, good.
So you might have to come in at 5.
Great.
And then the beginning of the council meeting at 3 is going to include this final ordinances that you just saw. And then a creek setback for 6630 Jefferson, which you guys saw already. They want to do a riparian revegetation in the creek setback. So both of those might be interesting to you if you guys are interested. It's a very planning centric meeting.
Okay.
And then since we have you, Diane and I are considering asking the chair to consider canceling the August meeting at the July 12th. I'll be in Europe at this point. I think all of our pending projects are going to be coming up in the July 12th meeting, and we used to require 30 days complete to go to ZDRB. We're now requiring 60 days. So we don't see anything in the pipeline that we have to push for August 9th. So if everybody else agrees, maybe at the next meeting, you guys could make that adjournment to skip the August meeting.
The chair will consider.
Thanks, Chair. Why I have you, Hillary.
We know where you live. We know where you live.
Last call. Did anybody leave this at the last CDRB meeting? All right. I gave it my best scholar try. Well, thanks everybody. I know this was a big meeting, so I appreciate all your guys' time.
I move to adjourn.
Well, thank you for all your.
Second.
Miller, Zagorczyk, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
All right, good night.